from the valley. I never rode as crazy as I did with them.
Oh, I'm sure they have like balls of steel.
You know, because you're in one mass, you're like this one fluid liquid vehicle. And so we just all go red lights. It's like a bus. It's like 4 blocks long. I used to think like being in the back would be like the safer thing. That was the worst. You wanted to be in the very front. That was the best. Because if you were in the back, you'd be the last one that was like 3 minutes behind the red light. And, you know, at least if you're in the front, you can guide over there.
Right.
Yeah. No, finally I stopped going. But
That was before I was a rider. I remember like we're on the motorcycles doing here at the parking lot. They're all sport bikers too.
yeah, pretty much.
You ride?
My first bike actually. I kept it when I left the country. That's my like get around town bike. A Kawasaki EX 500. I guess like 20 years old now.
He was first.
He used to have a ZX9. It was fun.
I went to a school like that.
Nowadays I don't know what I do.
The bike I have now.
We had a KZ1000 police bike.
Oh yeah, well not the police bike. I had, it wasn't that model. It was a regular KZ1000. Pretty cool down. It was a 1980.
But he taught me.
CRX 1200 is basically the same.
That was such a terrible thing.
Same UJ, you know.
Has a ZX9?
And I can
Yeah, I
understand.
mean, it's like a university out there. It's like a upright, no bearing. It's just,
One of those like leader bikes. They're all pretty much the same.
you know, I like
Somebody can deliver the lesson along the spot. Which is supposed to know.
CBR 600 that somebody. I've never really ridden anything
I
like
rode
that.
a friend's ZX10.
He volunteered
To get a nice ass bike again, I could go for it.
manifesto.
This
This is who he is.
my
He's
ZX9
admitting.
from the pack.
I mean, I understand where he's at.
Actually, in weight, I think the weight's about the same as mine.
Surprise everybody.
Wait, the CX-9, is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about the
Mine was like a 94 or something. But they made a lot of green ones.
They were still sort of upright riding, right? Or no, or
It was still kind of tight, it was a little handlebars, kind of like my EX5, which I like. It's good for place.
Very old rough.
I'm just a commuter now.
yeah, quoted every day.
Cervical didn't jump into the line. Cervical tried to take it from channels, tried to, and then
Yeah, that
backed
video.
away from
Yeah, that video.
It looks like you're totally like
kept pushing on the channels.
a hooligan.
I did a video once of just like riding relatively normally on the freeway, and when you watch it, you just think I'm doing crazy.
Yeah.
That's what I was like.
That's what it looks
Well,
like.
you got the wide angle lens on it, so it looks like you're, you know.
This guy's not going to get excited.
Hey Jeff,
Pulling the trigger on the.
you look like you're tearing it up there. Like, damn, Drew's like a maniac.
Can you, you're following me here,
totally like,
we're Google Plus buddies, right? Can you, I posted up the link, the live stream link, can you see if you can hit it from your phone?
Oh, the live stream?
Yeah, I posted the link in,
No, he wants to see it on.
right,
Oh,
if it
just
works.
the link is?
Yeah.
Yeah, see if the link's there. Protection. Data stream. Yeah, I see it on live stream. Yeah, this guy, it sounded like at the end of this video, it sounds like he knows he's going to die.
Give a long drive after?
Yeah, it's
Going back and forth. Are you driving? No, I'm flying. Yeah, but basically not this Sunday, but next Sunday. No, 17. That's crazy. We went for a couple weeks and back. I can't believe I'm also having unlimited PTO. I can't believe I have. No, I'm going to be working.
oh man, it's been
But I'm going to take a day off and take most of my kids. Oh, just start. I got my I've actually been
they're going to hear all this stuff.
I have to do it this year. Yeah, thank you. I'm making mine too. How long? Oh, also, what's this? You guys figure out what's early? Yeah, so I'm in my. I think I'm in my fifth year. Working in my 5th year.
Anyway,
Yeah, right.
As long as you guys take it, it's my concern. I don't. some sort of like
So
an
I think I technically should have already, mine should have already expired. So I'll hit my 5.
Yeah, those things.
Yeah, I guess.
I like to do something else.
I wanted to bring
the new
right? I wanted to
Apparently, his Facebook page
Where did you say you were looking in Mexico?
Yeah, I live in Mexico City.
and they never take initiative to that makes them responsible.
I guess I came back about 3 years ago.
Once you have all these stuff, you're on
Yeah,
the
God,
meeting now,
time flies fast.
and you want them to work to your monetary benefit, not your monetary deficit.
Yeah, I was there for about 4 or 5 years.
5 million people all of a sudden can have a participation in. That's how many customers.
I was
Facebook
working
got.
for a company here, a computer security company.
5 million
They were sending me down there on
And
business
they're
trips
readily
to training
identifiable
classes.
because all of their
I was fucking miserable, so
is in there. So while you're on, just go tap on the shoulder and say, how would you like to go
do this directly with the same people.
So, Facebook is not taking down this or told to
Kind of like the Mexican Fortune 500, you know, like Citibank.
behind them.
Not exciting work, but I didn't have to do much of it.
Yeah. Some things as he mentions people's names. Yeah. Well, they've got to get forward to make that happen.
Not even that dangerous.
So I noticed that, like,
Yeah, no, it's, I would say it's way safer than any border town.
Also, it's like,
It's questionable whether to be
we don't look like
Well, when I was down there, one friend of mine got kicked out of my
Stay
home
within.
on Highland, walking home. Another friend of mine got kicked out of her on Fairfax.
Just because it's
Thought I
readily
left
available
from there,
doesn't make yours
walking down the
spread.
street, a few blocks from her apartment. And like, that shit wasn't happening in my friend's place. I felt safer there. It's like any big city, there's bad neighborhoods. You know,
That's the way they work it out. They're not allowed to report on the cases.
you gotta watch yourself. Yeah, you know, if I'm walking down some street in a bad neighborhood,
Killing, report something like
maybe I
that.
got a juice bottle or something in my hand. It's something I can do a little bit of damage with.
look around and see.
Religions, this or that. That's our way of solving it.
You don't like the way things are starting to look?
Yeah,
Just
it's
do
like,
180 and
come on,
start going
guys,
back in.
that's pretty straight.
I always watch that like.
They steal your motorcycle, right? They say, oh, that's my bike.
Oh yeah,
And you're like, okay.
you would not want to ride down there. They are so insane.
I almost did that. I was like, yeah, I can expect
That's a good idea because some of these people
drive. We were gonna ride a motorcycle down.
drive, especially the copycats.
Texas and then up into the Yucatan.
They know how to get publicity.
And then we changed our minds and drove. And then we got to Houston and the guy's like, oh, we should have just do that. You have to drive to the easiest part of Mexico. Just take a plane, it's really cheap. We'll just take a plane to Merida.
I actually did drive there.
Oh, you drove from here to
I drove from LA to Mexico City.
I'd rather do that than go to Long Beach Gulf.
Today it's different than it was in the 80s and whatnot. Now there's what those are pay roads.
That's standing
Now there's I think 100% pay roads that take all the way to 150 cars.
Wow.
But it's like better than any freeway you find in the United States. It's very well controlled. It's all fenced off. You don't really livestock. You can drive really fast. It's being taken on the state road. And not a lot of people use it. So you just feel like you like the autobahn.
Changes society. Take you from part of the
It'll
change.
take you from
Otherwise, you're part of the problem.
goes into Nogales. So you go to from Nogales, Arizona to Nogales, and then you head on down to Sonora, and then Sonora.
There have been changes in how helicopter
Yeah,
pilots
I
were
get 15 to follow the
their
Pacific coast
helicopters.
until you get to
In
Nile.
LA, they got together.
And then it turns inland and goes up the mountain. You got to climb 7,000 feet.
Various departments.
Actually, got to climb 10,000 feet to get to
All
the
right,
rim.
what are your
Then you go down
capabilities of your news copy? And this guy said, well, I got this long lens that I can just lay back.
Pull up everything on
Aurelia.
He said, well, I'm going to fly at 10,000 feet.
Then you finally go to
We'll fly underneath you.
State of Mexico.
And between you and us, and another 7,000 feet.
I took my time. You can do it in 2.5 days.
It doesn't have your long lens. And
took two friends of mine and we just headed out.
60 degrees off.
Hello.
Your angle. You know, you won't get your shots. I did the situation. No sleep. They don't.
They have amazing buses.
The latest thing was
always wanted to go to Gold.
this guy was pulled up in an abandoned house.
I'm a little afraid of what else would it be.
Good half mile, a mile away.
Wrong time to be an American.
They would show you the grade school that was locked down because it was still closed. But they put this guy was moving around.
And he was fucking
There he is, the guy who's pulled
got to the
up.
border, and it was
Has
like
access
they're all
to a
these
TV.
people.
Oh, he can see it coming. You can see it coming, and you go, duh. Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, they've got the news agencies to agree that this is where the line gets drawn. So all around that scene, all these things they take pictures of, and they don't.
You were in Cancun?
No, this is a.
They start
Now we're in Guatemala.
Oh, down there.
Guatemala. I remember looking up at the sky, like as we got out, I was like, I almost felt
You see that?
I'd never seen that
Because of these
making that big. Like, it's so scary. I was like,
The crazy thing is when I was in Mexico City, you can see the stars. And I love astronomy, and I swear I think I got there for a star.
They get their money making up to
It's like being in Hollywood. It's just like
to
you
get
have a
the
red
same
gray sky at night, and lights.
I said, okay, here's what we
Then you look
can
down at
come
all the
together.
places in the city.
Do this, and do that.
and then we went to
Tons of people could do
we had to
it.
take a bus.
But if you had to get up and sit around and say, oh, gee, that's a terrible thing to be.
Yeah, and it was
That
like.
doesn't contribute to the
I
discussion.
remember the bus let us off.
You gotta
get a crossroads in the middle of nowhere. Another bus. We sat on the bus.
Whites is the line.
Getting stopped at the bus. And just experiencing these
Just go and say,
I do the same thing in Mexico. Because they look 16, but they're 18-year-olds doing their sort of military service.
But they have to have
They run these roadblocks, especially if you're driving home. That's when they stop. I've done my car service. I've done
you got their why? They went to their PR guys, the guys in the news media. They said, you gotta have this for us.
I've heard good things. A friend of mine just went down there on a photography venture.
But you see, they didn't escalate it to SWAT officers
She told me to
intimidating
walk up
them.
this one volcano, like
They went through the
at night. You had to go at night because when you go at night, you see everything below my country. But you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And you're like going up the gravelly
type of
It
situation.
sounded amazing. You could see the lava flow.
It was fucking crazy. The craziest thing that happened was like I was sitting in a cafe, like on this place that I got it on this kind of hotel, and we were kind of sitting there and we see somebody we know from where we're in college and I'm walking by. I was like, what the fuck?
What are the chances?
I mean, I've run into it. I was on the mistake. I was like, you know,
I don't know. I mean, you can think of the statistics of it, or you could say like, well, maybe the tall white guy stands out.
yeah, exactly. It's funny. It's like,
Get out of the country.
I actually run into people I knew.
You got all the way to Corona, but you had to come back.
Never happens to me in LA.
oh, really?
Because no one walks here.
Yeah, exactly. I would always run into these
Land
I
laws
probably
are-
drive right past people I know all the time here, but if you wouldn't know it, you're not going to see them.
There's nothing in walking distance. Everything's so spread.
Yeah, Mexico City's more like New York.
Yeah, I mean, there's little hot spots, like walking stuff, but like the city as a whole, like walking
you guys
for
make?
like the city itself, it's got a really nice
Yeah. He had his news
We have all these really
guy. He
nice
said he
white,
had
clean sidewalks
protection
that we
squads
use.
out. Guy probably listening to extra people. Because he listed basically police officers and immediate family. And he was put by. That was the thing that happened the other night. The daughter of the guy
get to the grocery store by
fiancé because he happened to be there.
I miss like being able to walk to my grocery. I mean, I can walk now to my grocery store, but it's like a mile away.
The daughter of the police officer.
You know the Sawtail area where the Japanese restaurant is? It's up there.
So you take 5 police officers, people like the chief,
Basically 2 blocks away.
and this adjudicator, and a couple other people involved in his cases specifically. and you multiply that by
I
two
could walk
people.
2 blocks and go to this like foreign market that had like all my favorite
All of a
cheeses
sudden you've got
and then go home and then
15 right
alternate
there.
the next day.
Yeah,
Walk
and
2
then
blocks over
start
to
associating
the big
with
communist market run by the city
fiancés,
where there's all the fruit stands.
You immediately got 40
You know, it's
people.
kind of like Grand Central Market in downtown.
Yeah, and if he's talking about all that, you can't tell where he's going to be until he starts moving.
Exactly.
And then you can calculate.
They're only open until like 5. So you
He's
gotta
not
go
going to
early.
be here. He's going to be making his way to release, which alert those folks.
That's one of those places where there's dead chickens hanging. Avocados are like 10 cents.
As I said, there was a guy in Colorado who stayed I live in this dense forest area.
One of these days I'll go back.
Certain you gotta take it easy in a case like that. Don't push this guys
You commuted tonight.
I have no idea what this guy's
But
got.
I'm normally in Florida. I'm in Florida for like I think I left in October 2010.
You drove out here tonight?
Tonight, no, I work in I come in a couple of times. Then I'm going back to Florida. Here when I when did you start? You started right after I was in Florida.
Yeah, you gotta have support. I wonder if that's in March or March.
2012.
So you're not gonna make anything sophisticated. They were working around how to make low tolerance.
Yeah, I remember now. Where in Florida?
Crash space.
Daytona Beach. St.
I actually spent more time on the Gulf Coast. I did a consulting job there for a band. I think it was like 2007. I was exploring a little bit with Fort Myers down. They already had it.
Okay, you went into my
You go inland a little bit.
Just in case.
Farther south, the farther
You
you
go
go.
pretty far in any direction in Florida to get the
Well, when
rest.
you're on the coast, you're sort of like there's a lot of people from the northeast that come down. But they're mostly like sort of like, hey, you doing there? They're like boondocks from like the boroughs.
I kind of see Florida as kind of white trash state that has all these random like old Jews and Haitians that just decided to move in.
Yeah.
See, and it was a real weird thing.
Down
Kind of
south,
made you
down south, Tampa area.
I've been a few times. It's just, I know it's not for me. The humidity is what would kill me.
What's that?
The humidity would kill me.
If you're on the coast, it's not too bad.
Yeah, if you're literally on
I bought it
if you're inland half a mile, you're dying.
The house I bought is like before rock. It's on the beach. It's like it's across the highway. When you see it, I can walk the beach alone.
I'll totally do it, yeah.
Oh yeah, we take a look at that bad boy.
They crack down on us over there. So it's
I was talking to Jay about it. Like, what is it? It's a printer. The print's
they ran the film.
any kinds of things. You can program into it. Like a cup, yes, like a cup. You can drink out of, yes, but you can drink out of. It's like, oh, what's gonna cool it? I mean, you've met Shane. Oh yeah, yeah.
She was just in conversation saying like, oh yeah, you know, I had got this fireboy, and when he mentioned it, she was like, hey, go for it. She's like, sure, I had 2 or 3, it's fine. Oh, no, why you short? Refill. Like,
Did you watch The Big Bang Theory? They had a last week on it. They had a thing about the available dolls. They ordered dolls online and they didn't look like them enough. So they're like, let's make our own.
That's cool. That's totally cool.
Actually, make it for ourselves.
yeah, I'm going back next week.
Looking forward to that.
I am actually. My kids live in South Carolina.
Yeah, hey, thanks for RSV puzzles.
You know, I've never been at Charleston, but actually I want to pass through South Carolina quickly.
Well, what's weird about it is it's really far away from the 95. It's like an hour away.
That's probably why, because I drove the 95 miles.
Yeah, if you're going, you can't pass by it. You gotta go. You gotta make your commitment to Charleston. But it's worth it.
The storms were actually, I mean, wasn't there
Some simple about it.
The first shock that goes to
Was it on the coast?
And I just told you.
Yeah.
Which is not in Charleston, but it's in Sullivan's Island, which is just, like it's just right there.
Isn't that where, like, they had an island, they had their hills on either side, they brought up the cannons to bombard the island, or was that some other
I remember they bombarded it for like.
Well, it was just like a threat. Like they brought up the cannons, and then the cannons were like, we surrender. It was on some island. And the mainland had a hill, and at night they brought up the cannons, and then the morning
Like a
came.
stalemate, like they couldn't, because it was so well defended, there was no getting in there, but then on the other side had endless ammunition.
Yeah, but as soon as they brought the cannons, there was nothing they could do, so they surrendered. I was watching some.
I read a little bit about it on Wikipedia maybe a few months ago.
Charleston's really pretty though. That's not really the ground.
Yeah. I stopped in Savannah on a road trip once, and I thought that was probably the most beautiful city in the
Now,
country.
Savannah is gorgeous, but it's not as gorgeous as Charleston. Charleston is better.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, but when they engineered Savannah, and it was engineered, they said it's going to be like a checkerboard. Every other city block is going to be a park.
It's true, but it's a little bit run down.
It gives a character.
Well, I agree. It definitely has more of soul.
I was not expecting that city, but when I saw it, I thought this could talk me into moving it south.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the thing about Savannah though is it's fucking run down. They got a paper mill right in town. It's like they'll make your eyeballs curl up in your head. But the thing about Charleston is it's sort of like there's so much
south?
money. No, it's north.
Okay.
It's about 100 north.
So that's probably about the height of the state.
I mean,
Like north south. I mean, South Carolina is really small.
oh, it is the low.
Most of what I've seen in South Carolina is looking over the Savannah River.
Yeah.
Are these things like progressive, or are they really?
Charleston is, but the problem with Charleston is there's like almost too much money there. So, and there's a problem with Charleston, but it's not like, it's not like a college town like Canada. It's like, because there's a big money.
I think my flight instructor went to that university.
There's a lot of cool shit going on. It's fun. I mean, it's not like New Orleans or anything. It doesn't have like
Savannah seemed really toned down, but still like kind of left progressive.
So that Charleston's uptight. Charleston is like, old from the south, old like southern aristocracy and shit. They're still really into that shit, and they've got different controls, and they've got like.
See, now I want to see it.
It's crazy, and like their Main Street, King Street is like where they're robbed. I mean, it's all like. No, I know. It's all around Charleston. There's all the areas around it. There's no recession there. It's like they're like they never even like here.
Money that's well invested.
If you've got
It's also like way cheaper to live out.
they've got multi-million-dollar houses. Like it's
Sure, but I know there's some places in South that can command what's for $150.
you don't have to go too far, but I mean, it's like in Charleston area. Like they had renovated like an old
The Lost Cigar,
guess how much was like 2 bedrooms,
like minus
like almost and I was like, this is not
Working in tobacco.
what's that?
Is this for executives who invent tobacco?
I'm like, who the hell is
So I went on a visit to days in North Carolina.
I was complaining about that.
No, I want to say it's hard to see.
Yeah, there's like 3 days it didn't get above
City.
0.
It felt like this many downtown, surrounded by miles and miles of activity. And they have to listen to weird energy.
But you don't have to go far outside of any of those urban areas.
Yeah, it's
he was in Bay. I was there actually to visit Bank of America. That one city it gives you kind of tax benefits.
It's funny because Greenville, South Carolina is very close. So it's like, Greenville's up in the high country.
Yeah,
Low country in the high country.
Greenville for my foot instructor. It's a big city.
Greenville, South Carolina, it's a small, very cute little city, but it's got a lot of money in. I would say a lot of bankers.
Yeah. It's not a single stock exchange.
And my daughter just weird when you want to pick up the they've got a big arsenal. It's all like, there's in the middle of the
yeah, exactly.
So what are you doing back there?
Being out in the middle of nowhere was pretty good. So, I don't know. I don't think one
Hell of a city you picked.
What, LA? I love LA. I love this city.
I grew up here. I mean, it's I learned to appreciate it.
If you want that kind of environment. No one was like,
Okay. I'm just like, I got so tired.
you didn't need the walking around. Just checking.
Walk. And if you find the right neighborhood, like you were saying before, you can hold it to that. It's like,
I love New York to visit, but I cannot live it year round. The humidity, I would say, is worse than having to trudge through the fucking snow and dirty slush everywhere.
It's like crushing in on you and it's constantly. Coming to New York to LA in 2000 was like, it was like getting out of fucking prison.
I just can't picture wanting to live in New York unless I was living in Manhattan. And unless you're making at least 1.5 a year, you're living like you just feel poor all the time.
You feel poor, you feel proud, you can't get the fuck out.
I'd like to live on Long Island.
All right, we're going to get this show on the road now. Welcome to the February 2013 meeting for UAC Los Angeles chapter. My name is Jordan Schwartz. I booked the presenters here. So thanks everybody for showing up for tonight. Theron will be on in a minute to talk about the MakerBot, but first I wanted to do some introductory stuff. So this is the Unix User Association of Southern California. And we have meetups on Unix stuff. The main way to be a member of UAC is to be on our mailing list. So how many people here are not on the UAC mailing list? Not on the mailing list. Okay, well, just so you know, we have a mailing list. If you go to uuasc.org, there's information about how to join it. We have three lists. One is the main mailing list. That's where all the discussion is about, Linux, guns, and beer, and other topics. Certificates, the history of Solaris, other good stuff. We also have one called UAC Announce. That's for announcements like when this presentation is happening, or we also have meetups down in Orange County. So just that's the one like with your kind of work email address or your secondary stuff. You can subscribe there and get a little less traffic. The third list we have is the UAC-jobs. That's for Unix, Linux related jobs in Southern California. UASC. You've been here. You've been eating our burritos and drinking our beer for all these months. And
I can't get on it for some major domo doesn't like it.
Oh,
try
okay.
it while I'm here.
Well, I'm sure we'll get you some. Yeah, Mario will help you out.
I don't have a real computer.
That's okay.
If you can hardly get in our house, you got the money.
They're all fake old.
So, and there's also UAC, yeah, and that's another hint. Put all your cell phones and pagers on stun. UAC jobs list is for Unix related jobs in Southern California. You can, if you're looking for work, you can post up there, hey, I'm looking for work, and also people will post jobs up there as they happen. The thing is, you do not need to be a member of the list to post a job opportunity or anything to the list. It is a moderated list, so if, say, some recruiter's nagging you about this great position that you're not interested in, send them to UAC-jobs@uac.org, have them send it over there, the moderator will look at it, and if it's legit, the moderator will send it on through to the list. So keep in mind about that. But if you haven't joined the mailing list, please do, if you're interested. Next thing, I'd like to say thanks to Media Temple for providing the facility, the food, the beer, the wireless, the live streaming, and all that good stuff. So thank you, Media Temple. And if you want to thank Media Temple, you can also help by sending a little tweet to @Media Temple, thanking them directly, because they've got a good social networking team that's always looking for good things. So tweet @Media Temple with thanks. I appreciate it. Also, if you're speaking of looking for work, Media Temple has some very interesting open positions that you might be interested in working with us here at in our Culver City. We run the whole show here out of Culver City, and we're a heavy Linux shop and use tons of open source software. So if you're interested in this, I'm sure you're interested. And hey, look, it's Media Temple super recruiter Drew Smith.
Yes, you guys can feel free to take a look at our website and look at the employment opportunities. If you have any questions or just want to chat, feel free to email me, drew@mediatemple.net. I'll be happy to share anything I have.
Put it on Reddit too.
Pardon me?
Put it on Reddit.
Good.
I'll tell you something later.
Very nice.
Hey Drew, weren't you guys voted like number 13 best place to work or something like that?
Yeah, we're working on that. We need to be number one.
Hey, we were number 13 with a bullet. Wait until next year. So yeah, there's a systems engineer position, network engineer, data analyst, all kinds of interesting stuff. And that is in Southern California. So, okay, so thanks Media Temple. Next bit. Okay, UAC, we have two chapters, the LA chapter and the OC chapter. LA chapter meets first Thursday in the month, so, and it's usually here. So, keep an eye on the mailing list. We've got a meetup site or whatever channels you figure. I figured out how to get here, but keep that first Thursday of the month open. Next month I'm working on a sort of a server bootstrapping panel, but I'm always looking for presenters. So if you're interested in presenting, contact me or email leaders@uuasc.org and give a brief description about what you'd like to talk about. If you only have like part of a presentation or it's a short thing, that's okay. We can take a couple of small ones and mix them together. But ping me or us to get that conversation started. And also, we meet the second Monday of the month in Irvine. I haven't checked the schedule to see what that presentation is about, but I'm sure it's something interesting. Occasionally, we will set up a carpool from here to go down there. If we carpool and take the carpool lane on the 405, we can get down there in about 50 minutes or less. So keep an eye on the mailing list for discussion about that. Other stuff. Oh, Scale. So, who doesn't know what Scale is? The Southern California Linux Expo. Does everybody know about that? Okay. So there's this awesome 3-day Linux open source software expo It's called Scale. So Google for Scale 11X or Southern California Linux Expo.
Look who just walked in.
And look who just walked in. Elon Rabinovich, who is one of the made men on the Scale organization. So Scale is happening Friday, February 22nd through Sunday, February 24th. If you go to the Scale website, you register. Basically, one ticket covers the whole weekend. And if you type in UUASC, I think all caps, you'll get in for. I think the cost is about $30, which is actually less than what you'll be paying for parking for the event. There are. Friday has day-long tracks, like there's a DevOps track that I'm associated with. Puppet Labs is doing a Puppet Camp talk. Opscode is there doing a thing on Chef. I think there's a Build Your Own Cloud Day. Then on the Saturday and the Sunday, they have this gnarly expo floor with about 100 exhibitors, including commercial vendors and different user groups like LA Pearlmongers or Crash Space will have a table there. Also, on the Saturday and Sunday, they have about 5 tracks of hour-long talks throughout the day. Tons of interesting information at kind of all levels, from beginning user stuff all the way to, OpenStack deployment or whatever. So definitely make an effort to check out Scale on starting Friday, February 22nd. Okay, I think that's, and somebody, I don't know if you're speaking at Scale, but he'll definitely be hanging out talking about CF Engine, Alexei, and he's got a brief announcement.
Thank you. So, yeah, we're doing a CF Engine training following Scale, the following Monday through Thursday. It's a 4-day CF Engine fundamentals class. And also at Scale, I will be teaching on Friday file editing with VI, basics. Which will be a repeat of what I did here. And time management for system administrators, based on Tom Limoncelli's book. And Saturday night, I will do a talk on file editing with VI, advanced topics. So highly recommended Scale. Can I put in a plug for LOPSA meetup?
Well, I think you already did, but go ahead, tell us more.
We have kind of a spin-off or a satellite group originated from UASC LA, and that's LOPSA LA, League of Professional System Administrators. It's a social meetup for sysadmins, just a get-together, dinner, and chat. Next one is Tuesday, February 19th. You're all invited.
Cool. Does anybody else have any quick announcements that they want to make? Hey, Carolyn from Linux LA.
I'm Carolyn from Linux LA. Also from Q, we're an IT talent agency. So we're representing both here. We're having a Linux LA meetup sometime, probably in the week or two after Scale. Just going to be like a roundtable discussion. So if anybody has any topics they'd like to talk about or wants to help lead the discussion, go ahead and hit me up. Also, if anybody has any needs for IT recruiters, also hit me up. So quick and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And okay, anybody else? Okay, with Mario.
I'm speaking at Scale at 11:30 on Saturday morning on the DoD and open source. And somebody who is not here but is a near and near UASC member.
DoD, so that's Department of Disco?
Yeah,
Oh,
Department of Defense.
Oh, Defense. Okay, cool.
And Phil Dibowitz is also talking, unfortunately at exactly the same time, 11:30 Saturday, on the choices that Facebook made on configuration control.
Well, you know what? Phil moved out of town, so everybody represent our local boy who's doing good, Mario Ovejas. When was that? Saturday at 11:30.
11:30.
Cool. Especially, we want to make sure that there's enough open source. Okay, anybody else? All right, so with no further ado, I'd like to welcome from around the corner at Crash Space is encore performance on the MakerBot Theron Trowbridge. Thank you.
Hello. Can you all hear me okay? Back there? Okay, good. I don't talk super loud. I'll try to project a little bit. I'm Theron Trowbridge. I belong to a group here in Culver City called Crash Space. We are on Venice Boulevard over by Overland. We are a hackerspace or makerspace or whatever you want to call us. A lot of people do software stuff, Linux, Unix, and and all that fun stuff. But we also do electronics and hardware and things like this. So we can talk a little bit more about that later if you're interested. We are doing, we have our weekly meetings we do on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. If you're interested, you can come by and visit and see the space and see the shared tools and whatnot. We're also doing, it might be of interest to some of you, on this Sunday starting at noon, we're doing a Pure Data patching circle. Pure Data is a visual programming language, open source, mostly geared towards audio and video sort of art sort of people, but we're doing a sort of patching circle where people get together and work on their projects. Miller Puckett, the guy who created Pure Data, teaches computer music at UCSD. He's going to be there. We have a guy named Julian Brooks, I think. I can't remember his last name. He's a composer and professor from the UK. He's coming. He's going to be demonstrating some of his projects and tools that he's created in Pure Data. We're also going to be working a lot with the Raspberry Pi. We have we have a distribution of Raspberry Pi that runs Pure Data. So you can actually, something that you could never do with, say, an Arduino, you could actually have a little, embedded system that would do interactive music that you could build into, like, an art installation or something like that. So that's Sunday from noon to 6. We'll be doing that at CrashSpace.
And there, you'll have Raspberry Pis, we have Raspberry Pis available at that one for sale or no?
Probably will. We do a lot of work with another nonprofit group named New Blankets, and Joe, the guy who created New Blankets, he has a bunch of Raspberry Pis. He brings them to the events and he sells them. His goal is to get these into the hands of as many people as possible. So we have a little kit with the Raspberry Pi, an SD card that has the Raspbian Linux distribution on it with the Pure Data pre-installed, and power. USB power adapter and USB cable and so on.
And it's because for the people that are maybe not familiar with Raspberry Pi, that kit will probably be what, run
about $50 for the set.
$50? That's incredible.
$50 for a computer. Yeah, freaking amazing. Computer.
Is there a page where I could see what you're saying again and actually
Sure.
to think about it? What is it called?
Crashspace.org is the Crashspace.
About the
Raspberry Pi
and that Pure
Pure Data. So Raspberry Pi.
P-E-R?
Pure P-U-R-E.
Oh, Pure.
PureData.info.
You have a Boston accent.
Yeah, PureData.info is where you can find out about Pure Data. And it runs on just about everything. It's a pretty impressive little thing. If you're familiar with the music program called Max MSP, Pure Data is the open source version of Max MSP. In fact, the MSP in Max MSP are named after the initials of Miller S. Puckett, who created Pure Data, and Max MSP, or Max in the first place. So, anyway, so that's some of the things that we have going on at CrashSpace. So tonight we're here to talk about MakerBots and DIY 3D printing in general. But I'll get into some stuff about why this is really exciting and why this is going to save the world. So, it's 2013. I want my freaking replicator. On Star Trek, they just go punch in and give me Earl Grey tea, hot, and it kind of makes it. Just kind of builds it out of stuff. This is the future, but I want this now. The cool thing is that they kind of exist, but they tend to be really expensive.
How good are they at making flying cars, by the way?
Not very good yet.
Okay.
We'll get there. We have to concentrate on televisions first. Flying televisions would be great. They're called airplanes, right? So, automated manufacturing is really what we're talking about here. This is not a new thing. It's been kind of going on for a long time, and it's just evolved over time. In World War II, they came up with this idea of numerical control so that they could make rotor blades for helicopters super consistent by having a machine that you could sort of feed in, not quite punch cards, but kind of large-scale punch cards that would guide the the automated cutting tool, so cut the same shape over and over again and be nice and consistent, because you need, if you're going to put 3 or 4 blades on a helicopter, they need to be about the same. In the 1960s, they sort of computerized that, and they turned it into, computer-aided design and manufacturing. And they came up with a language for all that called G-code. This is what makes all this possible. And then in the 1970s, things just started exploding. And they came up with lots of different ways of having computers or machines make things. We won't talk about all these, but some of them are really, really fancy. They use lasers and they're super expensive and whatnot. What we're talking about here today is this bottom one, fused deposition modeling, FDM. The main reason that we're talking about it is most of the patents on it have expired. So we can now build things like this. So the idea here is that we take plastic filament, and when we get done, you can kind of wander up and take a look. There's a spool of filament hanging off the back of this thing. I'll take it off. And it basically, little heater head here, takes it and melts the plastic, pushes it through a nozzle, and then draws out objects layer by layer, building them up. And so in the end, you can make 3D objects like this. So if you can design it inside a piece of CAD software, you can print it out on a machine like this, which is really kind of cool. So the question is, why do we want to do this? I think it's pretty obvious. In commercial applications design, obviously they use these kinds of machines for proof of concept, designing your thing before you go off and make sure it's going to work, before you go off and make 10 million of them and find out that it doesn't work. I think in the home, there's a lot of opportunities here to sort of fix stuff at home, replace small parts of things. The Parker Brothers, they announced they're replacing one of the Monopoly pieces. This week they announced that the new piece is going to be a cat. It's going to replace the iron. It's like, I really don't care. I don't want to have to buy a new Monopoly board to get the cat piece. I just want to get the CAD file and I'll print it out. And the cool thing is you can make things the way you want it. You can make them your own.
Well, you always could use anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go design my own cat and make my own little Monopoly pieces all I want. And a lot of what you can do with machines like this are kind of limited to things about that size anyway, so it's fine. And then, of course, you get into people like me, sort of hobbyists, hackers, makers, whatever you want to call us. People find this kind of thing, they're tinkerers. They find this kind of thing interesting and want to play around with them. So the big boy machines are really expensive. The model like this probably starts somewhere around $30,000. Most of us will never be able to afford that on our own. If you're lucky, you work for a place that needs something like this, and so they have it, but then the materials that it uses are crazy expensive, so you can't really use it for your own personal stuff. So, and then the really fancy ones can cost $250,000. I mean, they get really expensive, the laser sintering ones and whatnot. So, for the most part, these are out of the price, out of the affordability of the average person. So, so you either have to be rich, like Jay Leno. Jay Leno has one of the Stratasys printers in his garage because he's got a 1909 Aberson Jackrabbit that he can't buy parts for anymore. So he just has guys, and I'm sure he doesn't know how to do this, but he has guys design up the pieces, print them out, and they replace, so he can restore his old cars. There are services like Shapers and Pinocchio and iMaterialize, where you send them your little design file and they make it. They have these big fancy printers and they can make it out of metal, they make it out of plastic, ceramic, lots of different types of materials, and you can just send it to them and they make it for you and they send it back, which is great for one or two things as long as you have time to wait. Or you can do it yourself and you can get it now. So the machine that started all this is called the RepRap. And this was the Darwin. This was the first generation RepRap. I like that it looks like Tinker Toys. And it's a 3D Cartesian robot, and it has the extruder on it, and it basically can move in all 3 dimensions and extrude the plastic and draw out the object. So the RepRap, the name is short for self-reproducing rapid prototyping machine. The whole goal here was to build a machine that could make another one of itself, which seems really dangerous, but they never got to a point where it was able to print more than about 20 or 30% of the parts that you need to build another one. It's an FDM machine used because all those patents expired, so they're able to go ahead and use it without risk of getting sued by any large corporations. It was kind of made possible and powered by the Arduino, which is how many people, anybody here not know what an Arduino is? So Arduino is a little $35, it's a microcontroller, not quite a full computer, but it's got all basic components that you need for a computer. And the great thing about the Arduino is they took these microcontrollers, which have been around for a while. They're called the basic stamp or the PIC or the Atmel. But they took it and they built a little board. It's about the size of a pack of cigarettes. And they put all the basic components that you need to actually make the thing work. And you just program it with something that's very much like C or BASIC, depending. And you can then have it interact with real world things. And it's basically the actual chip on it has inputs and outputs. And you can make it turn on motors and you can make it receive inputs from things. So, and the great thing about the Arduino, it costs about $35, $40, depending on which version you get. And you can embed it into something like this and make things do things. And the whole Internet of Things movement is largely based around Arduinos with network cards on them so that they can talk to the internet.
What's the difference between Arduino and the Raspberry Pi?
The Raspberry Pi is actually a full-blown computer. So the Arduino, it's got a little chip on it, it's got a processor, it's got a little bit of memory, and a little bit of storage. But there's no inputs and outputs are just pins. The Raspberry Pi has some great stuff built into it. So it's got an HDMI output, so it has built-in video on board. It's got a USB port, so you can actually connect it to standardized peripherals, and it's got a little audio. It's got audio output, either as a separate analog audio or through the HDMI. So it's actually a real full-blown computer that runs Linux. You can hook it up to your TV, turn it on, and then you've got a terminal shell, and you're actually doing things. The Arduino doesn't have that kind of interactivity.
So it's a more powerful processor.
It's a much more powerful processor. What's on the Raspberry Pi is very similar to what's in a lot of network type laptops or high-end tablets.
ARM?
It's an ARM-based processor. So the Arduino kind of makes this all possible. And let me go back here. So all these white parts here, those are all printed plastic. So the idea was, let's print up a bunch of plastic parts and then get a bunch of threaded rod and nuts from a hardware store. And this came out of Europe, so it's all metric, which complicates things. Little smooth rods for some of the parts, and let's put it all together and put some basic electronics on it and make it go. But the basic problem is, because it relies on printed parts, you kind of need a 3D printer to make a 3D printer. So, which is a little bit of a problem. So, some of the guys involved in the RepRap project formed their own company called MakerBot, because RepRap is entirely open source. This is a perfectly fine thing to do. They took, you notice how this thing's a nice sort of cubicle box looking thing. Looks very similar to that, just with a plywood case. So the idea was, instead of taking all the printed parts, let's use the laser cutter that they had at a hackerspace in New York called NYC Resistor. Let's use the laser cutter and let's build a case that we can build around a 3D printer. So they came up with the MakerBot, and they were able to start selling them as kits. And originally, the basic MakerBot cupcake kit sold for about $650. So below $1,000, you could buy a kit and put together a 3D printer. We call it the cupcake because the build area, where they have the little platonic solid there, the build area is about the size of a cupcake is kind of what they said, and it's cute. Cute as a cupcake, I guess. So as I said, it came out of NYC resistor, below $1,000. If you wanted a power supply with the kit, use just a standard computer power supply. But if you wanted a power supply with it and a few of the tools, it was like $950. But still, regardless, it was below $1,000. And it used all off-the-shelf hardware. Some cases they had to order from McMaster Car and whatnot because again, coming from the rep wrap, it was all metric. So try walking into Home Depot and asking for 10mm threaded rod. It's hard to find. The electronics were custom. They took the Arduino-based electronics and they sort of made their own boards. And as I said, it's got the build envelope 100mm square by about 120mm tall. So about 4 inches by 4 inches by 5. Do you have a question?
The big thing here is the depositor head. Where do those come from?
The which?
The depositor head itself.
Oh, so that was actually mostly off-the-shelf parts. So they would use a DC motor, geared DC motor on the original. We've upgraded to steppers, but same basic idea. And they just a tooth gear that they attached to that. And then on that one they used nichrome wire wrapped around a hollow threaded rod to create the heated area, the heat zone. So, and then they just used the gear to push the plastic down into the heat zone, and they had the nozzle was one of the few pieces that they had to have, custom made. There are a few more custom made parts on this particular model that I have here, but.
So the unmelted plastic is the piston, basically?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it basically pushes the melted, and of course it's not really melted, but
yeah,
it's soft enough to extrude. So, there's a lot of really cool things about this. It's a open source project. There's a large community. There's worldwide. There's people all over the place. There's a very active mailing list called MakerBot operators, and the RepRap group has their own mailing list. And so, if you're having some problem, the great thing about the MakerBot is there were at one point. Of the cupcakes, there were almost 2,000 of them in the world, and almost all these people were on the same mailing list. So if you ever having a problem, all you'd have to do is say, hey, this is happening to me. And somebody somewhere is going to say, hey, that happened to me too. Try this. The MakerBot guy set up a website called Thingiverse, which is an awesome website. And it's basically a kind of like YouTube, but for 3D design, for CAD files. So if you have digital files that represent physical things, you can put it up on Thingiverse, people can download it, they can like it, they can comment, and almost all of it is largely open source. They do support, copyright license. It's very much, the community is very much about sharing and wanting to spread information and ideas. It's relatively inexpensive, $1,000. That's, you might have to save up for a little bit, but most people could get one if they really wanted to. And the great thing is it was relatively fast. Rather than going and designing your part and having a mold made and sending it off to China and having them make 10,000 parts and waiting several weeks to get it back, you can literally make something in 10, 20 minutes by yourself on your machine. There are some problems with the whole DIY 3D printing. It's very much a tinkerer's thing. And they've made vast improvements in it, but it's still, the machines are a little finicky. Each MakerBot has its own personality. You kind of have to learn the quirks. And some of this isn't as critical anymore, but there used to be a big problem with what we call ooze. Basically, if the machine sits there at temperature, gravity is going to pull on the filament just as, not quite as much as pushing on it from behind. But you get little stringers coming down, and as you're printing out, if you have complicated designs where your space that you want to leave, you would get little stringers of plastic across there. So it's not quite perfect. It's certainly not as great as fine a quality as you would get from other production methods, but
Sort of like eating fried okra.
What was that?
Like eating fried okra.
I'll have to take your word on it.
No strings between things.
Oh, okay. The objects that come out of it have a particular look, the MakerBot look.
Color?
No, actually, I mean, when we get done, I'll print some stuff out and you can come up and take a look at it in action. But everything, because it's building up the object layer by layer, you can see the individual layers. So it has a sort of look to it. Yeah. Well, it very much in the same way as the 8-bit thing. I think 20 years from now, you're going to be able to print stuff like this, and you won't be able to see the layers. And I think people are going to go to great lengths to put the layers back into their designs, in the same way that the 8-bit people like creating low resolution artwork for their projects.
Super 8's
Yeah, exactly. So we'll look back on that one nostalgically. And then there's certain design limitations. This particular machine, they describe it, keeping with the pastry or the baked goods metaphor, they describe that you can make something about the size of a loaf of bread, as opposed to a cupcake. So it's growing complicated, and there are other printers that can print larger things, but even the big commercial printers mostly don't make super huge objects. So you have certain limitations there. You're designing for it, you have to keep that in mind. Also, we don't really have good support material yet. So certain types of objects that you might want to design where they have things, you can't print your plastic out in nowhere. It has to be on top of something. So if you get, this guy here, if you look at underneath his chin here, up close, you see it's not so pretty. Because there was nothing there for the plastic to print on, so there were a few loops that were just kind of like flopping around until the bits on top kind of grabbed onto it a little bit. The big industrial machines have support material, dissolvable support material, where to take care of that, where you print the rest of the space around this guy, you print in another type of material, and then you throw it into some really nasty chemicals, and the stuff you didn't want would dissolve away and would only leave the stuff you did want. People are working on being able to do that on these types of machines. And there's a type of plastic called PVA, which is water soluble, and but being water soluble, it has certain environmental issues in that it tends to grab onto water from the environment and will start to dissolve if you just leave it out. So you have to be a little careful with it. And then there are two common types of plastics that are printed in these machines. One is ABS, which is what this is made out of, and the other is PLA, which is what this is made out of. PLA is corn-based plastic. In theory, it's biodegradable, so it's not quite like water dissolvable, but in the right environment, it will break down and go away. So it's possible that you could come up with a way of using one or the other as a support material and figuring out the right environment to get rid of the material you don't want. ABS dissolves very nicely in acetone, but acetone is kind of a nasty organic solvent. So you don't want to be dealing with acetone any more than you really have to. Actually, I should have deleted this slide. So one of the nice things about it being an open source platform, lots of people are always trying to figure out ways of improving it. So on the cupcake, there were a lot of different upgrades that had been made over time to it. They went through multiple different types of extruders. So the first extruder used nichrome wire that would just heat up when you apply the current to it. They were trying using power resistors for a while, which turned out to be a bad idea for a variety of reasons. And now they're using actual heater cartridges, which are designed to do what they're trying to do, which is always a good thing. And they've gone from using thermistors to try and sort of measure the temperature, because you want to keep your nozzle at a very consistent temperature when you're doing this. And they've sort of upgraded that to use thermocouples, which are a little bit easier to calibrate and deal with. The Thing-O-Matic is the second generation MakerBot, so it incorporated a lot of those upgrades. What I have here today is the third generation MakerBot, is the Replicator. They have since released a Replicator 2, which doesn't use all the wooden parts. It actually uses a metal frame with plastic siding, and it looks a little slicker. It's a little bit more rugged. There's the replicator. Notice they like showing, oh, you can print an entire chess set in one go. And they've actually added two print heads, two extruders to the replicator. So they're sitting here side by side. You could load 2 different colored plastics in at once. So you could print both the white and black pieces at the same time.
And they can do the cross on the top of the king, even though it's nothing below.
Yeah, kind of. You tend to sort of, as you're designing to print using this kind of method, you tend to sort of keep in mind what you can and can't get away with, and you tend to learn over time that certain things you can get away with, so you'll design it sort of like, oh, that should work. And if it doesn't, the beautiful thing is, it's like 2 cents worth of plastic, so you can set it aside and make another one. So there's a couple examples here of things that people have done with these at CraftSpace that I like using. So CraftSpace is now a nonprofit organization. We're waiting on our determination letter from the IRS, but we have a board of directors, and Daryl Strauss is our CFO. And he had a dishwasher at home that broke, and it turned out it was a little tiny plastic part that was about the size of a quarter. And it just worn away. And he tried ordering the part from the dishwasher manufacturer, and they kept sending him the wrong thing. So he was kind of faced with throwing away, getting rid of his dishwasher because, you know, a penny's worth of plastic wore away. So he's like, oh, this is dumb. I've got access to a MakerBot. So he pulled out his calipers. There was enough of the part left over. He measured out what it would look like, designed it. He used Blender to do it in this case. And then he printed it out on the MakerBot, figured it's, you know, this ABS plastic, it actually doesn't soften until about 220 degrees Celsius, which is well above the boiling point of water, so it should be plenty to it should be able to withstand the water in the dishwasher. Dropped it in, and it worked. So he was able to fix his dishwasher with the MakerBot at CraftSpace. Then one night we were sitting around at CraftSpace, and Matt Pinner's one of our members, and he likes doing wearable stuff, so he does a lot of sewing. So he has this hoodie that has little, he used the MakerBot to make plastic, horns like spikes like Godzilla. He's got little LEDs in them, and they flash. And if there's another hoodie that's designed like it, they'll actually sync up and flash at the same time. It's actually really cool to see. So he does a lot of sewing with electronics. He left his thimble at home. He's like, so he was either going to go home and get it. I'm like, oh no, don't do that. Let's go to Thingiverse. And of course on Thingiverse, there were a half dozen, this is almost 2 years ago, there were a half dozen different thimbles on Thingiverse. I'm like, let's just print one. So we downloaded the file, printed it out, and like 10 minutes later he had a workable thimble and he was able to continue working. So there's a picture of him sewing with the thimble. And the cool thing about this one was, if it didn't fit his fingers, actually it was a little tiny, it was a little on the small side, but he was able to make it work. He even had the little divot in it, so you could put the, to hold the needle a little bit more securely. And we could have made this a little bit larger and reprinted it, so it would have fit him exactly. But it worked, and it held him over. And then, my last example, I live in a house that was built in 1925. They don't make the appliances in my kitchen. Some of them they don't make anymore. And the knobs, they don't make those knobs anymore. If you go in and buy replacement knobs, they're all standard, but they don't sell my knobs anymore. So when we moved into the house, we had 2 knobs on the range hood. One was missing and the other was pretty badly melted. And we were just living with it and just pulling the melted one out and moving over to the other side to turn on the fan, and then moving it back over to turn on the light. So I was like, oh, this is dumb. I have a MakerBot. So I went and I used the what was left of the melted knob to figure out the right size and printed it out and put it in. So my first one I did out of black plastic, but for the ones that I actually did, blue is my wife's favorite color, so I made them out of blue plastic. So we now have blue knobs on the range.
On any of these, did you have to do any, or was it advisable to do any finishing of the part afterwards, polishing up, smoothing off edges, or?
On the knobs that I did, yes. I ended up, I either mismeasured or the plastic, especially on that MakerBot, it tended to ooze a little bit. It tended to put out a little more plastic than it should have. So parts like holes, interior holes, tended to come out a little undersized. So I spent a few nights with the file, sort of working out the thing so it would fit nicely. If I were to do it now, and if I were willing to rerun the part and redesign it slightly, I could probably get it perfect without it.
I also wonder whether you can design parts like this as basically the inside for a mold, so you can mold it out of something more durable or more useful. Is that something you have any experience with there?
I haven't done that. We keep threatening to, especially since one of the things I like making are these little coins, little poker chip sized coins. And we have some old aluminum computer cases that we want to melt down and make aluminum versions of these. So we were thinking we could probably do sand casting with this.
Yeah.
And instead of doing lost wax, do lost ABS casting. You know, heat it up enough, and the ABS will burn out. So, no, I haven't done that. I've seen some blog posts of people who have played around with it, and
Well, that's you're still making a positive with the MakerBot. He's talking about making
Right.
the negative with the MakerBot.
And there are some, one of the, not super early, but one of the early things that was posted on Thingiverse was actually a mold to make chocolate dodecahedrons.
Yeah.
So,
I could see making the positive and doing a latex mold around it, and then doing epoxy or something in that to be like.
yes.
Can
In
you,
fact,
can you possibly?
no.
Oh,
This,
okay.
no, but you could use it as a positive to make a latex mold around, and then use some sort of resin casting.
Yeah, right.
There's an organization up in Seattle, is a hackerspace called Metrics Create Space, and they have a different type of 3D printer that they built that uses plastic dust essentially, or really fine ground plastic, and it sprays adhesive onto it, and then it coats more on top and sprays the adhesive. And the parts are actually come out very nicely, finely detailed, but they're pretty fragile. So they make latex molds out of those parts, and then do resin casting of them. And they actually cast all the printed parts to make your own rep wrap, and they sell them for like $30, I think, for a set of rep wrap parts, which would take you probably 30 or 40 hours to print if you already had a 3D printer, and they can cast them in a couple of minutes.
Right.
So there's all kinds of
What's the name of the makerspace in Seattle?
Metrics Create Space,
Spell it.
METRIX.
Is anyone still selling the kits with all the parts?
Yeah, there are still some people that sell, they call them rep straps instead of rep wraps, because they're not reproducing, although that doesn't make sense because the rep is the reproducing part. Anyway, they're kind of bootstrapping kits to make your own, rep wrap kit.
What about something of this kind of quality?
Actually, some of the rep wraps work pretty darn well. And we have one member at Craft Space. He bought a Mendel, MakerBot Mendel, which is the second generation rep wrap on MakerBot, rep wrap Mendel kit. And he was very frustrated. We do a monthly meetup of 3D printers at Craft Space. And he would bring it in and he's like, oh, this stupid thing. So he decided to take the electronics, which worked, and essentially rebuild the whole robot. And he came up with, he used 80-20 extruded aluminum, beams, I guess you would call them, built a frame for it, and then put a big old print platform on it, and came up with his own 3D printer, basically, that was rep wrap inspired, rep wrap based, and he calls it the MakerBot. He put it up on Kickstarter, and he raised $170,000 on the MakerBot, and he's still fulfilling the Kickstarter orders. But he opened up a 3D printer store in Pasadena. So, he sells them as kits. So, and they're basically rep wraps, but it's I think a smartly designed rep wrap.
You know what his store's called?
it's Dee's Maker. DEEZ's Maker. And it's on, I think it's on Lake, just south of the freeway. He's in the same little mall, strip mall thing as Hobby People. So you can actually go buy some of your hobby parts there and go over to him. Anyway, so if you're looking for a different type of printer, and that's, again, completely open source, he uses a different control software than what we use with these, but they work really well, and he's gotten some really great results with the
I got something for you. I think somebody could make a pretty good profit on it. I'm past this stage myself where I could fall on the ground. Everybody knows what prostate cancer is, yeah? And you're probably aware that the up and coming and most useful treatment for it is the proton accelerator. Now, these people are living in the Neo-Paleolithic age as far as controlling the beam of protons. They don't try to focus it as you and I would with similar to a cathode ray tube or something. They collimate it, and they collimate it with a chunk of plastic. And that chunk of plastic has to be fabricated for each patient separately and distinctly. And this machine would do that as it is. They machine that thing, that piece of plastic, it's a piece about like so. And one of these machines could make the things just beautifully. Now, how many people are being treated with proton beam therapy for prostate cancer? God, it must be 50,000 people a year. And every one of them has to have one of these collimator blocks. I think somebody ought to go talk to these people and get himself a hell of a business going.
There you go. You can buy the machine for a couple $1,000s and make a lot more. Do they have to be customized to the patient, or?
Yes, each one has to be to the patient.
Medical devices industry, bureaucracy dominates everything.
These people.
Anything like this, I think some common sense would improve the situation. We're almost certainly be defeated by FDA.
Well, these people are these are hip shot type people. The Food and Drug Administration says you cure prostate cancer with scalpel. But there's about 8 of the machines that started in use in the United States, and there's about 12 more being built in the world today. And it's coming right along, but these people are definitely not in the establishment. Sometimes you do something. Loma Wind Medical School is the only place that has one.
Okay. Stop it. There's a project for someone. So, what can we look forward to in the future for this type of manufacturing? Obviously, we'd like to make them larger, so we can make larger things. Be higher quality, higher resolution. Support materials, so we can do more complex parts. Because with support materials, there are certain things that you can manufacture this way that you can't manufacture with any other way in the world. You can't do it with the CNC mill. You can't do it with even hand tools. You can manufacture enclosed gears and things like that. You can do entire gearboxes on a 3D printer if you have the right support material available to you. And you couldn't do that with anything else. And where it gets potentially more exciting is we can do different types of materials. Right now everyone's doing plastic. It'd be great to be able to do conductive materials like metal. And there are people that are playing around with trying to do biological materials. So we could print a kidney. Especially if you could do it from your own stuff, so that you can make your own, print a kidney that's effectively identical to yours. It would never get rejected. A lot of people playing around with that. So this is the kind of thing where I talk about this now, the notion of oh, you have kidney failure. Let's go print a new kidney. It seems crazy, but some of the stuff that Jules Verne was talking about just 100 years ago seemed pretty crazy at the time, and now they're commonplace and even seem quaint. So we're actually getting there, and of course the velocity of progress is pretty amazing. So we can do it's pretty. The fact that we can do anything like this at all is pretty incredible. So the Industrial Revolution. There's different schools of thoughts on how many of them we have, how many of them we've had. I sort of break it down into two. So the first Industrial Revolution was really kind of tied into the whole notion of division of labor. The whole idea that you could specialize in something, and you could, you didn't have to go gather all your resources, grow all your own food, make all your own clothes, make all your own stuff, build your own house. So people could specialize in. You could have people who built houses, and you could have people who made shirts, and you could have people who grew food. And then you could have access to resources from all over the world, and all you had to do was basically trade for those things. And we developed the notion of money as an abstract concept in order to trade for those things. But the upshot of this is you could have things that you could never have, you could never make on your own. That were too complex for that, which is awesome, kind of. So taken to an extreme, division of labor causes a problem. And on the downside, we have things like abuse of power. That's where we get labor unions, and environmental damage, where they're trying to make things that are so great, but they require so many weird chemicals and whatnot. They just dump it out in the river. That's not good. So the problem is that we get to a point now, and I say this as a generalization. Of course, it's not true, but people don't make things anymore. People in China make things. People in Tijuana make things. But in the U.S., people tend not to make things anymore. So I like using the example of your television. How many people have ever opened up your television and looked on the inside?
The latest one.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, and I'm going to date myself a little bit here, when your TV broke, chances are it was one of the vacuum tubes inside the TV.
Is that old?
Yeah. So you opened up the TV, you opened up the back, you unplugged it first, you opened up the back, you unplugged all the vacuum tubes, and you went down to Radio Shack, and they had or you went to an electronics store, and they had a little vacuum tube tester. You plugged them in until one of them didn't light up. This is the one. You bought a replacement, you went home, plugged them all back in, and then your TV worked. Used to be able to do that. But now your TV on the back says, no user serviceable parts inside. And they really mean it, because the PC board inside your TV that controls the whole thing is probably about the size of a credit card. And so vacuum tubes have given way to surface mount components. And as a result, because we got this whole, cheaper and smaller and that whole thing.
Hey, let me expand on that for just a second. Right out in front here, we've got National Boulevard, which used to be called Exposition Boulevard, and the railroad tracks have been there forever. Where those tracks cross Baloney Creek, just down the street here, there's a bridge. And under that bridge, when I was a boy, there was a hobo who lived there. And this hobo had himself that marvel of modern design, a crystal set. And the kids in the neighborhood used to go by there and talk to him, and you can't imagine how many kids he got started in electronics from gazing at his crystal set with its user serviceable parts made out of oatmeal boxes and things like that. And those kids grew up and became electronic technicians during World War II.
And you can still build. I mean, crystal radios are simple enough that you can go build one. And not yet. I'm getting there. So anyway, get to here is most modern electronics are disposable because they look like this on the inside. And when this breaks, you have no real way of figuring out what's broken inside it. And even if it's one of these little tiny, these things are greatly magnified here. Even if it's one of those, chances of you being able to repair it are basically nil. And I recognize this is not the insides of a TV, but you know, it could be. So basically, as the Industrial Revolution rolled around, and you know, somebody specializes in something like making shirts. Spend all your time making shirts, you're going to get good at it. And so I buy shirts from somebody who knows how to do it. If I tried to sew this, I would make a horrible mess because I don't do that. So I buy my shirts from somebody who does do it better than I do, and I give them money in exchange for it. I can't build a television. Neither can you. And unfortunately, the people in the factory making the televisions can't build a television either. Because all they're doing is doing they're either pressing a button on the pick and place machine, which goes to places all those surface mount components, or they're pushing the screen into place and then doing, putting a few screws in. So that's where we get to John Locke. He's a Scottish philosopher, and his whole thing was that labor creates ownership. If you go and work the land, if you have a piece of land and you go till it and plant stuff, and the stuff that comes out of that, the fruits of your labor, literally, are yours. Nobody else can lay claim to them. So, to some extent, the same thing goes for goods. So, in the Lockean sense, I don't really own this shirt, right? I gave some money, some abstract pieces of paper, or actually gave a credit card to somebody behind the counter in exchange for this shirt. Certainly, if you go buy something with abstract money, it's worth less to you than if you had made it. So you don't own your television. And you don't own most of the stuff that you have, unfortunately. And this causes a lot of problems in the world. So places that are super poor in the world, where there's riots going on and people protesting and whatnot, a lot of it's because of this disassociation. People spend a lot of their energy making things that they don't own, and in fact, never could own from a completely philosophical standpoint. But that's where Industrial Revolution, what I call 2.0, and some people call 3.0 comes in. The awesome thing about this is you can make stuff. So, we have this whole thing, the maker movement. And it's sort of the focus of it is largely Make Magazine and hacker spaces like Crash Space.
Yeah, but if you take a CAD file that you got off the internet, and you have this machine that you bought, and you make something out of plastic, you didn't really make it.
Oh, I can take this the thing that I downloaded off the internet. So if I have a record player and I don't have a 45 adapter.
Oh, yeah. But that's about the same as buying it.
Yes, it is. But what if I wanted to make this, what if this doesn't suit what I need it for? So I can take this and I can make it any way I want. I can take this and
That's
say,
different.
oh, that's cool. I can redesign it.
Andy, where would you go buy, record stuff these days?
Yeah.
That's a little difficult.
Best
I got
Buy,
some to
maybe?
sell, yeah. Tell me where to sell them.
So, yes, obviously some of this stuff here, yeah, downloaded off Thingiverse. I didn't actually print this one myself, but yeah, this came off Thingiverse. Somebody put it in and printed it out. But I might decide to change it. I might decide to put somebody else's head on here. So, Bree Pettis, the guy who created MakerBot, he went on the Daily Show and they seeded out to Thingiverse scans of his, not Daily Show, he went on the Colbert Report. And they ahead of time went and scanned Stephen Colbert's head. And they put that on Thingiverse, just so they could see all the different things people would do with a scan of Colbert's head. And so people did all sorts of crazy stuff. And there are things like this on Thingiverse where all they did was, they take the body of a cat and they have face of Stephen Colbert on it. And so customization is kind of a big part of this. And the beautiful thing about it, actually I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but the beautiful thing about that is, the example I like giving is, you need a toothbrush holder, or a drain stopper for your sink. Breaks.
I do.
So what happens when it's the middle of the night and it breaks, and you need to wash your dishes or give your dog a bath or whatever? So usually the solution to that is you go get in your car, you drive down to, hopefully you have a 24-hour drugstore somewhere nearby, and they sell things like that.
I could take an old sock and jam it in there.
Plastic bag and then the sock.
Yeah. But you go there and maybe they have one design of stopper, and it's ugly plastic and it's kind of whatever, but you need it, so you buy that. And the thing is, that got made somewhere, probably in China. They made a bunch of them, they put it on a ship, they used a lot of fuel to get it over here, and then it sat in a warehouse somewhere waiting for somebody to buy it, and maybe somebody's going to buy it, maybe they won't. And then all these resources that were used to make it and ship it and store it, you're paying for that. And it's still not necessarily exactly what you want. So the great thing would be if I could go to Amazon.com or someplace like that, go and say, oh, I need a drain stopper. Oh, look, here's CAD files for 100 different designs. Go pick the one I want. Oh, I like that one. It's got a little bird on the end of the chain or whatever. And I download it. And if it's not exactly what I want, I can change it and put my name on it and print it out whatever color I want. And those sorts of contributions are what I'm talking about here. It can be yours. So I just went through some of this stuff. So basically, manufacturing on demand, at some point, everyone will have a machine like this in their house. And you'll be able to download files to it and print out small things that you want. And those things will get bigger and they'll get more complicated and so on. But the great thing is you can make it on demand. So the resources are only used when it's actually needed. And they don't have to ship large things all over the place. All you have to do is ship the plastic around. And you get that sense of ownership because you made it. And trust me, even if something like this, I downloaded this from Thingiverse, I printed it out, and I would hang on to this thing, and I like using it as an example, but I feel so much more precious about this than I do about the other 45 record adapters that I do happen to own, right? I would throw those away before, I would throw the turntable away before I got rid of this, just simply because I hit print. There's this psychological thing that goes on with it.
Like you buy a cookbook and it's got the recipes, but you still have to, like make the pie according to the recipe, but you can modify the recipe if you want.
Exactly.
So even without any kind of reference to new technology or digital stuff, the boundary between what you're making and what intellectual property you're getting from other people as like the feedstock into what you're making. I would say a cookbook, or like just say downloading a recipe for a pie or whatever.
Yeah.
Answer that question in the same way, even without reference to MakerBots or these CAD files.
Absolutely. Very much the same thing. Opposed to going and buying like a frozen entree from the freezer cabinet at your store, going and buying the various different wheat and the flour and the vegetables and the meat to go and make whatever it is that you're gonna eat that night. I think that's a good one.
So how do you interface with this replicator?
A couple different ways. There's a USB port on the back, so I can plug it into the computer and have software on the computer called Replicator G, which lets me talk to it and feed files to it. There's also an SD card slot at the side of it.
Oh, I see. So you put the model on the SD card and put it in and just press print?
Yep.
Okay. There's something I saw at SIGGRAPH a couple of years ago that blew my mind. It was a 3D scanner vendor booth right next to the 3D printer vendor booth.
That's one of those holy grail things. There are good 3D scanners that are available, but they're crazy expensive. They're tens of thousands of dollars. There are cheap 3D scanners. There's an Autodesk has an iPad app called 123D Catch, where you take pictures of all different angles of a thing, and then it uploads them to their servers, and then they kind of try and figure out what shape it is.
Wow.
I've never seen it work super awesome. but it kind of works. And so there's another type of scanning called structured light scanning, where you project a regular pattern onto something, and then you use a camera to detect the derivations in that pattern, and sort of use that to figure out depth. And then people are working using the Kinect, the Xbox accessory that does motion detection. It's got a little 3D camera in it as well. It does structured light detection.
Structured light?
Yeah, so the Kinect actually puts out what I call pseudo-random pattern of dots. They're infrared, so you can't really see them. But if you point your cell phone camera at it, your cell phone camera will see it. And it puts out all these dots, and it knows the pattern the dots are supposed to be in. So if a dot is a little bit out of place, it's able to say, oh, well, it's because it's closer. It's reflecting off of something that's closer than the background. And so it can kind of reassemble relatively low resolution. It can say, here's the shape of that thing for one side of it. So you could do that.
That's structured light?
Structured light scan.
Do you see anything on the
structured
horizon?
light scan, thank you.
Do you see anything on the horizon coming along the lines of the affordability and quality of the scanning?
I don't know what's holding up some of the more high quality scanners. There's probably some patents in place that are causing the problem. The reason why we don't have these handheld scanners are pretty awesome. They've got a pair of lasers in them and a little camera, and they've got accelerometers and gyroscopes so they can tell which angle you're holding it. And then you put the thing down that you're trying to scan. You just move it around, and it just sort of says, "Oh, okay, there it is."
You realize every one of the components that you just listed to make that scanner is a high precision component, and therefore of and in itself is expensive. So you make a summation of those, you get an expensive scanner.
Right, but
it's a natural consequence, whether or not you have patents involved.
Granted, but there's an open source 3D scanner project called the David project. They're basically they've got a laser line scanner, 3D scanner, that you can build for about $200.
Okay, but you noted that your little bus there has a stair step in it.
Yeah.
And that stair step is caused by your stepper motors. You could have higher precision stepper motors in there, but you would no longer have a replicator available for $500 because the stepper motors would drive the price of the replicator higher.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
So some of the things that people are saying, why can't we do this, are monetarily a challenge because of the precision that they require to get what you're trying to achieve.
You can get a MEMS accelerometer for like $3. So the precision's amazing.
If you wanted to, even if there were, you could kind of do the lo-fi version of it and buy all the components and build the thing on an Arduino and actually get it to work. It wouldn't necessarily be as good as the high-end ones. That's for the very reasons that you're talking about. You could build it yourself, even if there's patents, patents encumbering it in the technology. But you just can't really sell them to other people, and that creates a little bit of a barrier to entry that's a little bit.
What about the sort of manual stylus tracing kind of 3D capture? It's precision stuff. It's precision, but it's much lower tech.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm not aware of any sort of open source versions of that.
The mathematics are a little harder.
Yeah.
So often you'd want to model your new part on some existing part, like if you're fixing a knob. So if you don't have access to a 3D scanner, how do you handle that? How do you modulate it?
A pair of calipers.
Yeah.
And CAD software in your brain. I mean, it's
Is there open source CAD software?
Oh yeah. There are some very good ones.
Problem is being good at CAD is like being an artist. So.
It's all There's a couple different there's like Blender is a very very well known and well supported open source CAD software, but it's not really manufacturing CAD software. It's intended for doing 3D character animation.
Yeah.
So it's really geared towards certain type organic type modeling. And it's a very, you know, it takes a lot of, takes a certain mindset and a certain skill level to do that well.
Yeah, the thing there is with low-cost PC stuff, with open source software, low-cost MakerBot, right? That's showing up in living rooms or dens, and right now, right, there's young kids, right, mucking about with those, like some people here were mucking about with Commodore 64s or Apple IIs, and right.
That's the whole impetus for the Raspberry Pi, of course, is because we don't have Commodore 64s and Apple IIs anymore, machines that there's not really a fear of, you know, people actually messing with and really learning, because you kind of don't have to anymore. But yeah, I mean, I grew up with a computer in the house all the time, so I'm super comfortable with it because my dad worked with computers when nobody really else did. So I'm of a generation where all this stuff is all supernatural, and kids that are grown up on things like social media and other, you know, things that are new and kind of cryptic to me, it's completely natural to them. So there's whole skill sets that kids today, when we get this stuff into the hands of probably not the current generation, but the next generation, they're gonna just, this is not gonna be unusual to them at all. They're just gonna go, oh, of course, blah, 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 let's go do that. And they're gonna be a whiz with this, you know, CAD software, and electronics design, and 3D printing in a way that just boggles my mind, and I think this is pretty awesome.
Which is why they need to be open source.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if it's tied up with IP, then it's not going to make nearly as much progress.
So some of the advancements that, you know, that will happen on this, the idea of being able to print conductive material. If I can print a trace of conductive material, I can print a resistor. If I can print a resistor, I can print a capacitor or a transistor or any of those things. Meaning, we could start doing the building blocks where people could print crystal radios. Not that there's anything to listen to in analog radio broadcasts anymore, but you could do it. And it'll get to the point where I could actually print out all the components that I could use to build the TV. And all the things that I was talking about, you know, one of the horrible things about televisions is they all kind of suck. And I work in the film industry, so I actually am intimately familiar with the ways in which television suck. And there's a lot of different reasons, but one is that you buy it and you get all these features. And somebody like me, when we pull a television out of the box and put it up on the wall, the first thing I do is I go into the menu and I turn off all those little features. The things like, you know, smooth flow and all the, you know, high frame rate, you know, where they try to make stuff move more smoothly or try to make it look more like film or whatever. I could turn all that stuff off. I don't want it, but I can't buy a TV without it. So the nice thing is, what was that?
Why do you turn it off?
Because it messes everything up.
He has a different.
Most people don't notice that it messes everything up. My wife can't tell. She's like, "What are you doing?" Like, trust me, it'll be better.
He knows more details, and he doesn't like people messing with his details.
Yeah, and I want to be able to watch stuff on my television the way it was originally made. And you know, we have reference monitors. Well, if it was made in black and white, yeah. You know, we used to have reference monitors in you know, at work, and they were CRTs, and they really had one button. It was the on-off button. And then after a while, they had to put a, you know, anamorphic 16:9 button on it because somebody got clever. But really, that's all you needed to be able to do with it. And they don't have that anymore. They throw so much stuff on it. I'd like to be able to make a television that doesn't have all those extra features. It would certainly be a lot cheaper, use a lot fewer resources, and it would potentially work better. So, anyway, as I'm saying, in the future, you're going to be able to make your own television, and you can make it the way you want it, and you will. So most of you would get the joke. I want to get one of those mugs and take a picture of it inside the replicator because then it's actually more appropriate. This was long before the replicator. But anyway.
Not to.
What?
Not to.
It's a Star Trek joke.
That was a.
Captain
Check
Picard.
this guy.
Captain Picard would go to the replicator and say, tea, Earl Grey, hot, and it would make it for him, and he'd pull it out of the replicator on Star Trek.
Sorry, I was just into Hitchhiker's Guide jokes.
That's
Hey, that raises a question. Is anyone making, mugs or anything out of this? Is it toxic?
Well, that's a good question. So the plastic, MakerBot will go out of their way to tell you that the plastic is not considered food grade. The plastic itself, it's just plastic. ABS, we on utensils that are made out of things like ABS and PLA. In fact, these guys are probably largely PLA because they make them, or sometimes you go to restaurants and you get the really flimsy stuff and it feels like it's dissolving in your hand. Because that's the same type of plastic, right? And it tends to be relatively inert, as long as you don't do crazy things to it, like heat it to 220 degrees Celsius. So that's where we start to get a problem. You're heating it up and pushing it through a machine, and they have no idea what the inside of the machine is, how clean it is, what other kind of stuff has gotten in there, and if you get environmental stuff, dust and whatnot, put it next to the plastic when it goes through the extruder, it gets mushed into the plastic. So,
is it off gas? Do the plastics ever smell funny later?
They don't smell funny later. They smell funny at the time that you're doing it.
And then they have no scent later?
And then they become, pretty, they're, both the ABS and PLA are pretty good thermoplastics, so.
Well, hey, speaking of the smell when you're doing it, aren't you just about ready for a demo?
Yeah.
You can make a Twinkie with that, right? I mean, it's probably the same stuff that's. Oh yeah.
And a nice Twinkie holder too.
Well, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I thought they started making it again. Oh, they just start making it again? I guess
One
you
of the
don't
oldest things on Thingiverse is actually a shot glass. Because the notion being
can't live without
that when you got to the point where you actually got your printer to work, you would print out the shot glass and then do a shot because that was a sign that you had actually accomplished something. Here's some URLs to some of the things I was talking about, by the way. So the question about sort of safe for food, the answer is really no one really knows. In my opinion, it's probably fine. Probably doing much more harm breathing in the fumes as the extrusion is going on than you would ever get from putting it into your mouth.
Well, you want harm driving to work on the freeway.
Now, one of the nice things about, so I'm printing with PLA here, and yeah, please, if you want, come on up. We're going to head out. I'm printing with PLA here. One of the nice things about PLA is it extrudes at a lower temperature, and it smells like waffles. Now, of course, apparently, smelling waffles when there aren't any waffles present is apparently a sign of having a stroke. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But ABS smells like plastic, and some people are very sensitive to it. So we're printing this green plastic here, and if you take a peek around the back, you'll see there's a spool of this green plastic on the machine. So what? Kind of. And actually, the weed whacker stuff tends to be nylon, and people are experimenting with printing nylon. In theory, it should be perfectly fine. So the ABS does tend to smell a little worse, and some people are really bothered by it. PLA is a lot. It's less obnoxious.
Masking tape because
the masking tape turns out to be a good material for PLA. It sticks pretty well to the masking tape. So you want to stick to the surface you're printing on temporarily, so it stays put. Now, how does that work? Now, printing with ABS, people use a material called Kapton, which is this orange, reddish orange sort of tape. It was developed by NASA for the Apollo missions. And it actually, when it's heated to about 100 degrees Celsius, melted ABS sticks to it beautifully. And when it cools down to about 80 degrees, it pops right out. So it's actually kind of awesome material. The PLA doesn't stick to it quite as well. I'm kind of trusting this is actually working right now, but it seems to be doing okay. Yes, this platform is heated right now to about 50 degrees Celsius, so 5 degrees, something like that. You're not going to burn yourself on it, the fans turn off to try and bleed a little of the excess heat away from the extruder because it's not printing. So I'm printing on this.
Yeah.
So the fan spins. You notice there's a pretty big heat sink so we got stepper motor. We have a little body through which the filament is being pushed. The gear is inside there, and then there's a big heat sink, and then the fan. The idea is to just, I've got heat going on down there, and I don't want it sort of getting up into the body. I don't want to melt the actual body of the extruder, and I don't want to overheat the stepper. Because most of those things are bad. Yeah, the plastic itself sort of provides a little bit of the...
Yeah, it's the Google Plus page has the link. I tweeted it, Facebook. I sent it to the UAC announce list. Can't find it.
One of these things, I'm going to just, sit at home and try it as an experiment, see what the experience
And so you can actually go and take advantage of that and make really fine detailed parts by taking that advantage of that. ABS doesn't stretch so much, it gets kind of stringy and it gets thin, but it doesn't really stretch.
Of course, the beer's much cheaper at home. Or not as high.
All the Pabst Blue Ribbon you can drink.
It comes out a little bit more liquid, and it tends to stick very nicely to the point where you can actually pause this and swap out a little plastic and start to use it. It depends on what it is. I like this PLA a lot. So like this is PLA. This is ABS. I have a different choice.
You're looking at it. That's not
PLA is a little bit harder. It's also a little more brittle.
No, I zoomed in too much.
Nope. That was printed on Kapton. So that Kapton is very good. It's like
Well, wait. No, they just moved out. This is delayed.
the bottom of it is very much good. The PLA was printed on this with a painter stain. So it's got a little texture to it from the painter stain.
I just want to get sized first.
What was that?
Did you print your ring?
Yeah, this ring is printed.
Yeah.
So this is the
that's how much time
logo, the
delay
Craft
is?
Space logo on a ring. We have a guy who designed this and decided to make it, and we have a little we have two different membership levels, and the upper membership level is a key membership so you can get into the space. So I have an RFID key to get into the space. So he took his ring, and while it was printing, he dropped a little RFID tag inside the ring. So he walks up to the door and goes to open up the door. He's a big Green Lantern fan, so
All right.
so he made this ring for me. Unfortunately, he didn't think about it. The Crash Race logo is actually backwards, mirrored. So, but if I punch somebody with this, it would leave the logo. Anywhere from dozens to hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
If you're careful with it, you don't overdo it, and you're lucky, you can go quite a long time.
What kind of maintenance do you do?
Not a whole lot. Every now and then, I need to pull the filament out and sort of make sure that the feed path is clear and that the gear is clean. Whereas the toxic will shave off the gear a little bit and it'll have a little No, it's definitely. Generally speaking, once you get it set up, I find that once you pick them up and put them in the car,
Check it out. It's not bad. Just getting people, people kind of standing in the way.
my experience with the first thing that breaks.
I'm trying to see what's going on.
I've never seen one of the
I mean, I could go in tighter. It's just it gets a little tricky.
Once you see break first, it tends to be the exterior. It's most complex. Either the motor starts, gets overheated, especially if you get the fans, sometimes you're not careful. I'm holding a pair of tweezers because sometimes you need to fill in on it, and it's really hot, so I don't want to reach my fingers. So, but if I stick these accidentally and break off some of the blades, the fan won't work as well. I'll tend to overheat. We've had some problems with the one in Crash Space with the filaments starts heating well. And then it tends to sort of have this chain reaction, snowball effect of clogging up the gear and then overheating.
We're streaming it. We're streaming the whole thing. Yeah, oh yeah, you can.
Yeah, it just seems to be this sort of cascade effect of bad things that
It's a
yeah, and to do that is a little bit of pain after pull this whole carriage off, disassemble the whole thing to get out the gear, and then use like a little demo tool to screw it. Yes, I'm pretty enough. So, yeah, so MakerBot now sells these pretty get online kit. Their feeling was that then they can calibrate and test it at the factory.
Yeah,
and they'd be much more consistent once they rock. A lot of people were not into it at the very beginning. Just a little bit about cut. But I tell you, out of the box, these things work. This is cool. Yeah. So, yeah.
It works. It's just right here. It's just volume right here.
But it looks like it's not taking it from
There are people, I mean, so MakerBots.
I mean, you should, if you can tell mic, you should test the mic.
Whoa.
Less than 5 years worth of experience of DIY printing. So, you should honestly, on the main article, saying that their printers we have a big company in Crash Space.
No worries, yeah.
Basically, the next part that I come in is going to be
next week or next month. I wanted to do a panel. Like a couple of people talking on the phone. Somebody Google Voice or whatever. So if we could figure out.
We have a mic.
Yeah.
We have a mic we can hook that up into. Like I don't know if you're here for the whole staff or yeah, like we had a mic on the side. Yeah, that we have something like that. You can set that up.
I'll hit you up.
Yeah, definitely.
But this is awesome. Thanks, man.
Have a good night.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you had someone that was actively monitoring.
Yeah, you can. So you load the CAD software into the Slicer program. Slicer program goes, okay, you give it a whole mess of settings. There's way too many knobs on that. So you can go and you tell them, how tall you want it to be, what temperature you want it to be. And it goes and it takes your tree, all the slices and layers, and figures out how to draw each side. And then it's a little hard to tell back here and on this piece, but you know, the inside it does things like it does so you're not printing solid pieces of plastic. As it, when the head comes over here, you can kind of see yeah, so you can, that's one of those styles. You can tell it completely hollow or you can do it completely solid. Or it's like 35% in fill. So then it figures out how to draw each side. Basically it draws around the outside. He doesn't let us take the shirt. And then it goes inside the fill. I was like, and then here's the fill. And it makes some weird decisions. Now if you're crazy, the file that it outputs is the G code. So it's like saying instructions that, you know, run the CNC mill or whatever. It's basically just a series of turn the heater on, wait till it gets some temperature, go here, go here, go here. So if you wanted to, it's just a text file. So if you wanted to, you could go in and hand edit it. And in the early days, there were a lot of hand edits that I used to do. But they mostly it was what it would do at the very beginning. I wanted to get into a particular way, so I have a little block of G code that I would paste in there. Yeah, you could go in if it made a particularly stupid decision, correct it, but you'd get lost really quickly because it's like assembly code, or you know, even more detailed than that. It's like yeah, absolutely. And yes. Yeah, there are previews. In fact, after a session, it pops up a preview and I can step through and move by move to see what's going on. But usually if it's like, oh, that's no good, then the solution is slice it with different side. Yeah, so the 3D format that we feed into the software is actually
and the best view remotely.
native format for a different type of 3D rendering.
There's 18.
Which is a resin stuff where they use a UV curable resin in a bath that basically you cure a little tiny bit on top and then move it down and put a little more resin on top and cure that.
Yeah, that's what the 3D printer guys at SIGGRAPH told me to do. So how do you go from STL to that?
So then you feed that into a slicer blade. There's a tool called slicer. For this I use a G. And it does all that slicing. It takes your STL file, which is a mesh 3D file, and it slices it out and figures out how to draw it.
So do you see this going from Arduino to Raspberry Pi?
One of the guys, Diego, the guy who does the crash-based member, designed his own printer. He's got a guy who works with him who's crazy sharp guy. The electronics piece.
You need to petition MT to get one.
But Rich,
Actually, I had tried that when CrashBase first opened.
It sounds like a cool place. I want to go.
Some of the other software running on the Raspberry Pi, you have to hook up to this. And then the Raspberry Pi has a wireless interface on it, and it's got a full, you know, a web server. So from his smartphone, he just goes, oh, start printing that one. So instead of hooking up to,
I mean, even when we keep ourselves, we use make custom MT decal, custom MT gear that we can give away in our kudo boxes, or not our kudo, but our swag boxes. So here's a custom printed MT something or other.
Oh no, the little 45 those would be awesome.
The little MT chips would be awesome on 3D. What are these? What are these?
For the record,
This, however, rip off of the clip.
That little thing he was holding up as an example. What are those things?
Before they even started shipping.
Are they little spacers or something?
Yeah. So the old 45 records had a big hole, right? And the 33s had a little hole.
Oh, so it's an adapter.
So the record players have just a little thing, so you put the little adapter in the 45 record, and it's just
Gotcha.
play your tune, take it out, pop that, and put it in the next one.
They make them. Lift.com.
Be interesting to get to say it.
Oh yeah, it'd be very cool.
Oh.
These actually make magazines sent me. I have a few of these.
Because vinyl back in these days. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, somebody on Thingiverse got tired, and before the Kickstarter was even completed, based on pictures from the Kickstarter and the measurements they got off their iPhone, they designed this up. So being quick to market is everything. Because it's, you know, it's very difficult to protect this type of thing. It's one of those so simple, like, why didn't I think of it? Well,
I thought of it a long time ago.
there probably are, but all the services I'm aware of are elsewhere. So, you know, if you email them or you upload your file to them, they do it in that area. Yeah, I mean, so you
this process.
I did read
Therefore, doing this
So this was printed on our couple, so this is first generation. This same part, this is printed on. Yeah. And this was printed on another kid that we my guess is that's probably a 3 or 4 hour. Yeah. So that's one of the problems with the local service bureau. Because you're not going to want to sit there and watch the whole thing.
And the gas that's when you drive there and electricity.
But, you know, it does get old. Yep. That's straight for the printer. That's on day instead of waiting a week for shipping. Yeah, this stuff does sand pretty nicely. Especially the
eventually it might be.
A solvent, you know, maybe a solvent. You can either brush it on and it will take care of all of the lines. Your whole surface is not a subset. So there are ways of finishing it, making it really fair.
Okay, but if your dream is one of these in every house, that's the level at which it will be.
Oh, I modify that. My dream is one in every Jerry's house.
That's fine.
Not one in every house.
Because if you're doing your own stuff, is my point.
So they can just download one and print it out. They don't have to know anything.
They asked the neighbor, they actually, I don't know if you can hear those printed.
But it'll be as easy as a microwave oven.
Software now has
where you just put it in and hit popcorn.
And it's the same material. You're on very quickly.
It's probably not going to be that important, but close.
And then when it gets done, it just tears.
MakerBots are not going to go out of business. There's always going to be some sort of population who wants somebody else to do it.
But
some people can't cook something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anything
why does it have to have a kitchen in it?
You know, a lot of times you just design it so it's like, okay, I'm going to print this.
Natural.
Yeah.
I just realized that, but it isn't going to absorb the entire.
No.
The entire population has to have brilliant technology.
Well, yeah,
they can just shove down their throat before they start realizing it's brilliant.
They don't
Look at the internet.
They don't care to. If there's a section of the population that doesn't care to know that it's
Well,
brilliant.
eventually they do. Look at the internet. It's just they're really
I mean, these are the lines here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty like this.
Yeah, shell prompt with Gopher, and then we have, you know, a tablet that you can just touch.
But in the internet, if you remember the 70s, getting on the internet.
Actually, yeah, you can actually see
You had to be a member of the community and
So it's pretty great. This was printed on which is a transit.
But they did it because they were contracted for some reason. And they were therefore authorized to be there against the
Nice to meet you, Joe. You too, Alexa.
Yeah. Then you got the people that keep arbitrarily set. The initial community was you get a lot of this with this tool, and they were respecting the limitations of the tool.
It goes pretty easy.
Yeah, but the initial community gave you
So when this is done, we'll talk it off and you can feel it. Email, you didn't have a lot of space. Right, because it wasn't anybody. It goes everywhere. That's true. Email was back to nice objective, and the objective is respect. Right. Then the law came
yeah. Because they're trying to make it light and it's light plastic. Right. And this was basically that we have illegal prints and illegal things with this thing. So some people start just to make it rigid. You get
You mean copies of intellectual property?
Yeah. So there is water soluble support called PDA. They're really careful with that. So basically, if you're going to print something like that, you need to leave it in a sealed plastic bag with lots of desiccant until you're ready to print, and then you need to feed it in, and then you're ready to take it out of the printer and put it back in the bag. Because they will demonstrate water in the atmosphere like a certain MakerBot actually sells this. It's a little bit quirky, but some people have gotten it. So he's got plenty more to play around with.
Actually, kind of biological samples. You were printing on something that's not compatible with encapsulate other things. You make a part you in a machine.
Usually have leftovers. Put it in something like this. Mix them.
Make it a case of
I didn't bring it tonight, but my Raspberry Pi have this
Not just a simple structure like a metal structure.
Yeah.
An actual organism.
Hey, Eric. Eric. Yes. So, hey, Theron, what did you print?
What do you think he gets 3 samples of blood or saliva?
That's pretty cool.
Well, it's communicating.
How is this?
Oops.
I put it on high contrast. Yeah. Let's see, where do I?
Here, you probably want to come back a little bit anyway.
Yeah,
So,
but you got the idea.
you even got my thumb in there.
Well, we'll see here in a few minutes.
Oh, it does it autofocus.
Why did you know you had this much time
They don't know.
Here, okay. Yeah, you're at the right position. Yeah, you're fine. Excellent.
What luck. Did it focus?
Yeah, we're waiting to see if it'll focus.
No, it's fuzzy.
Yeah, it's fuzzy.
Why don't you block the rest of the room?
Well, he'd have to lower the emblem on the page in order to bring the background up.
Well, or we could try and set the focus, but
Well, no.
they get the idea.
People can see that there's a thing that was just made.
Yep.
In my tablet?
Oh. Yeah, the extruder. Yeah, this is draws about as much current as
As a what?
Not going to flip off your light bulb.
Exhibit A.
What is it?
It's a little Star Trek logo.
So that's a power brick from
Well formed.
Yeah. Federation of Planets.
Kind of runs her. This is great.
Hey, yeah, no, this worked out very well. Yeah. See you around. See you at scale. The emblem signifies the Hey. How goes it, man?
Good.
The tricorder is
No, I meant the thing they tax us off.
Okay, that could be, yeah, that could be one.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, that's how you print it out. So it's got a little triangle bezel and it's got a circular section behind it.
And I'll get transient balance.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I said the wrong word.
The replicator 2. Well, actually, we had sort of a working title for
That might be illegal.
Yeah. No, that was skeleton inside.
He was saying you could make illegal things.
The PA.
Well, playing now not only something that has intellectual property problems, but criminal kinds of things. Like we have parts for assault weapons.
They extended.
Every time something extended the lease.
More so with the talking about we extended for 2 years. Well, that's all another issue. Yeah,
Unfortunately, there are
completely close in your fingers. This is also
just about everything except
I saw that thing. It's like say rolling the windows in your car all the way.
So that's the image streaming. I'm pulling that off the wireless.
And it's 18.
So this is the encoder?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well,
Cool. That's.
So the thing is with live streams, since they own the box and then they own the servers as well, they can do all their custom compression whatever they need to do.
Yeah. It's cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, because the most of the encoders I've seen are like these big like rack mountable deals. That
Yeah. And I think this is only.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I'm curious if that would work with anybody other than them. Or if it's just if it's.
Well, then here's the other thing. I can go and start when I'm done, start, stop, and then save it.
Yeah.
So it's like it doesn't have to live there.
Yep.
Yeah, this is.
It either has to be at the temperature where metal melts.
Of course, they got a good camera. And the thing is, with the PA too, so it's kind of interesting.
So there's another space turned into offices then, or
Yeah, somebody else.
Somebody else.
So how are things going?
are primarily used for doesn't have the durability factor.
It's things I've thought of.
There are guys who
yeah, you take all the little pieces and then assemble them. Every individual piece.
you have to make sure everything
complicated.
field strip,
assault weapon arms, and all the
Something people learn. And they can do it fast.
So basically, what happens, let's say, if you mark on your card, it's now a different material, you have to reprogram that, right? And how big are the difference, let's say, between those two ABS?
But if I wanted to get crazy with the PLA, first I just wanted to I could, a couple of weeks later, I could increase those differences to get better quality on this. But generally speaking, I find this that's a little bit, that's a little bit. So, in theory, again, there's a
push on inside, so it's got a limit. So there's a range of layers.
Correct. So the software that you get was this. Does this include the basic CAD program or just the program that takes CAD input or CAD output and converts it into recipes?
So it does. You feed it whatever you want. So if you download it from Think
So that was never an issue.
with whatever CAD software you want. Basically, any piece of CAD software.
I have a common CAD format that
The only one that this thing cares about is scale.
although I still send it.
Scale is very common for it. So
A lot of free tools.
The only time it's ever stays.
You didn't get into it on I was talking about the blenders are very popular.
CAD program.
Yes, it's CAD, but it's not like CAD. But you can do 3D models and all output.
I don't think they signed off on it.
I use myself as a piece of commercial software now, which is a little bit of design oriented. But that's because I can't afford Rhino or SolidWorks or one of those.
Yeah, that's something I just basically I used to work in Vietnam software development. I remember basically when AutoCAD was absolutely
compared to something
I was back in the 80s, the original slow space and multiple screens. We were competing with something like stuff like that. I did some plot optimization as part of the software that I
That was actually very well planned.
The Katia was, that was the time, originally with the French company, it was then it was then one of IBM. But they ran the, I think they were constantly with Russia back then.
Get one of those IBM RCs.
And we were running on PCs with two monitors, cost you maybe $15 per
Really distorted like you can't. That's their file format. It's basically their file format.
He's saying that they did I thought that was like, I thought I read that there was some guy on his phone that created that project. But he may have used that data.
The other tool that
Katia, I remember that was very fun. Yeah, it's like 1,000. Because one company that customer core was Sauber. They raced cars, and they were working with Mercedes. And they got the basic engines from Mercedes. They got all the drawings of all the engines, which they were then adjusting as drawings from Katia. They were actually mostly designed just back then.
Katia's going to die.
There's some big companies that are still using it.
It's only a handful of very good.
And it has actually, when it comes to putting a lot of pieces together, this is basically what the real.
It's got the most awkward interface people go to school for.
So this is when he said basically everybody can learn mostly doing 3D models. I think most people actually have no 3D.
They don't have that spatial concept.
So if you don't see something or don't see how big something was 3D models,
just thinking in Cartesian coordinates.
as soon as comes something, what you do is you screen or a piece of paper, most people they there are completely
check the level of the resistance from the platform it's a little clunky. They should have used 3 scripts instead of 4. So there's some mostly because when people design those activities,
There is, because I walked up to it. Say it was this meeting place for that's on Roxbury.
You say not Tuesday?
On Sunday.
This Sunday.
Well, see you around, man.
So they're trying for, since the Raspberry Pi came out, trying to get one.
really?
Well, every time I try to order some, I have to spend money in there. Oh, next one. No, I think still, because they're so.
Yeah, they're easy to get. The new model came in the US,
I think it's not really okay made for some people's work.
Well,
I'm actually looking for a C model.
Well, the whole, sorry, this, it's just a.
Yeah, I know.
This is just this is why this is empty. It's kind of serious.
Can this one alternate?
Yes. 64. Yeah, basically, if you want different materials.
You actually mix it within my
You have to design it as two separate objects.
Everything we can.
Slice each one individually, and then.
Well, at least the
It's a little.
So it would be very hard to have the same color, but different colors on the same.
It'll do. They like using 100 or so virtual machines.
That's one of those
they use little cupcakes where the frost on the top is thing on
my minimum dimensions stuff like that. It's a nice 64.
Yeah, it's a single Raspberry Pi.
The same kind of setup that they have. Like integrated matrix.
So this is a 0.4mm also.
Is there a feed? Is there a video feed or anything from this meeting still?
Anyway, it's good to see you.
Yeah, hey, the lights when you first coming down.
What's that guy's name?
You need at least two. You need to do.
Does somebody know, can I get my friends onto what happened to me online?
But tonight I had a
Is there a video feed? Can I re-see what we saw at the meeting? Is it only live?
Well, here, when they have the OpenStack, the MBO.com super post or whatever, I just pop on and trade. Oh, it's Blue Line is the only Staples Center, yeah. Or when
you get, yeah, some brick after our order. What was your job? Flots of it.
Yeah, it's perfect application for this one.
So when I lived here, at least I was out, in Santa Monica, West LA. I wasn't sort of, whenever I come back to my parents live in the valley, it's brutal.
Oh, actually.
No, that's not the valley. That's like, yeah, that's a whole different valley. But
Well, the other thing is, if you can get to,
that's the thing. It's like you were saying. If you cross halfway across the city to the place you don't want to be, there's then public transportation to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. But here, from here,
which way is shorter to?
Yeah.
Back to Washington or the next station?
Oh, which is shorter. I take
So
the Culver
what you
City
should
one.
do is you should try out one extreme of the all the conventions you have to set them aside because none of them work.
Yeah, I just.
So that's why I don't use Wonder a lot because it's confusing and it just makes me feel sad for the world. So
It's actually worse. Asperger's in the
then it has to take. There's another
There's a line,
yes.
the one that flies the green line. Yeah, but the green line,
Green line, you're like in what?
yeah, so if this doesn't, it's there.
It's a light train software. Culver City stuff.
For people who are
Plus Culver City stuff. It's got a very seamless. Yeah, that's pretty cool. They took that. There was a meetup in North
all
Hall.
the things that make up your thing.
And they took took this, took the train. That was pretty cool.
The right side and the outside.
Yeah, yeah. 45 minutes from now. But you got to change the train as soon as it's traffic. It takes some time. It's the 7th Street Metro.
Yeah, especially if you're
Oh, really? Tonight?
Yeah, it's always, every time I run it.
it's one of these open source things, runs on everything, and it's free. And it's got
Well, hey, I'm glad you made it.
It's not exactly rectilinear is the problem.
So I was telling you about this, one of those developers.
You can do that. You just have to.
This is like
So you didn't pack up all of a sudden.
Incorporate.
Oh, can I touch one of those? Is it too late?
No.
My friends, I have friends on and they want to, oh, that's, I thought they were fine.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the thing that they do with crash space is really
Now,
cool.
is stuff from
Yeah, no, I know.
I'd like to get some, I'm trying to cover this,
the slides, the top.
Yeah, you know what? That's the thing. So they had one. They had one before, and I just went there. I gave them 50. Then it was all set up. So it was like you have some speakers, and I plugged some speakers, and I plugged it into my laptop, and I already had the software launched. So I don't know the built-in software, but I could do it on the Raspberry. You know, it was like, oh, this is
That's good.
Let me get you a hard drive.
well, it's just the menus, like.
Right. Virtual, yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Because the software that supported everything. But it was cool to just have it on the Raspberry, just sit down and try to go.
I mean, it works, but it's not as
I had this smooth as old piece of crap, 1.6 gigahertz Duron. And it actually does everything smooth except 1080 is where it starts to break.
Yeah.
It does all the effects beautifully. If you get down that specific, you cannot use the link.
So that was a really good
won't even work.
Okay, and the
Just the RAM.
yeah, those are Raspberry Pi.
How do you say your name?
Some of them are, some of them are, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought it was like VLC in a box.
I know, the only place like.
Oh, no, I know. I saw him last
But it does it really well because the codec's in the Broadcom chip.
I don't know what it is.
Actually, it's done in.
Straps on.
The Broadcom
I got
chip.
myself a decent VLC.
Oh, yeah, well, that's working with it.
I'm pretty happy with XGMC.
So I tried to load it up in the other files.
Yeah, but not, it's the one on the.
I gotta do this.
We have the format that it requires to place that given.
I'm not transmitting my
Yeah,
video.
well,
That's just too much. If you want someplace to drop things. Yeah, I'm not transmitting like a library.
But it has that built into the graphics chip. So they coding, ship that file to the graphics chip and it just does it really nice.
Why would the SIM card?
But no, it's not as
I
good.
have no idea, but it doesn't.
Well, should be sitting there like, I like lower power. I want to do that. You got a place right by these chips. You got a dream object that can throw it around the camera and I need to. Hey, go,
It's hard to find.
You can obviously take it out of the SIM card in, but I don't know, like you said, it supports with that, and I'm not going to live one more day.
I would think so.
Like asteroid vector.
Yeah, they do large
Just can't do vector unless your monitors also.
That I can have, I don't maybe
Yeah,
know,
it's
that's
like black and white big.
Right. Well, the propeller. That's the cool thing about stuff like this. Is the dream object.
I'm no fan of propellers.
Yeah, well,
That's
that's
why I
too
use
much.
It's a weird chip.
Set up the specifications.
But I was impressed that they
farther away from the machine. It seems like an elegant solution rather than making it
Yeah, well, the Carl did mention something.
But I use it as a mail server and Astro server.
Yeah.
As a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, if I leave it on 24/7, it uses a couple watts of power.
Okay, so you can order them online.
PCs for video capture. So they have like
They used to be difficult to come by because they couldn't get
I buy one of those like
they can
$20
make
things that takes
so,
video.
so they have them in stock.
Two cameras on there.
Well, the other one is the Sage, but they don't come with the SD cards.
Well, you can do it all with USB, right? Just get a bunch of USB.
This was there's only one of those USB guys.
If you go to the Raspberry Pi website, you can download the image files that you write on.
I mean, the Raspberry Pi just plug the USB.
Okay, so on Sunday, we're doing a Raspberry Pi this Sunday. So we're doing this. Yeah, it's
So I was looking at a lot of the security and others you can buy that
Yeah,
well, there's this chip that's basically a Chinese knockoff.
We'll be bringing this over here.
The Freescale IMX.
We'll have that comes with the SD card already converted.
ARM chips. Yeah, it's basically the same chip. It's like in a Kindle, like the same family. Those chips have an MPEG encoder and a camera, or some of them. And then the capture hardware and video for encoder. Yeah, so the Chinese knockoff of that same thing, StrongArm, and they have a distribution of Linux that runs on it. So you boot it up, and as long as you have a capture device, it has an Ethernet controller built into it, so you can make an Ethernet camera very, very simply. That chip, the part is, I think, $20 or something, if that.
Nowadays, you want like a high camera.
But if you go on Costco fries, those systems are all.
It doesn't matter.
Well, that's why I suspect they all.
They're like $500 and you get like one cameras and
Did you archive the
stream?
Yeah. So, well, I will.
The name of the
So now I've got to stop it.
If you go to like Alibaba.com,
But yeah, well, so what I'll do is,
boxes that run
and it, it starts way early, so then I can hit a stop time, pull it out, stick it up on
So it's the
YouTube.
same architecture, it's just one's made to go on a shelf with analog
And he was going to
cameras,
set me
the
up
others
some,
go into the camera.
so we'll figure
It's the
something
same
out.
basic chip.
I'll let you know.
311.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd like to have the link. Try not to hold it hostage for too long. But this came out great.
Good.
Glad you can hear it and everything. Oh, here, check it out. It's decent. It's a little delayed. Oh, jeez. No, this fucking camera is awesome. Oh, this is such a hot setup. And the cool thing is, when we do a Google Hangout, we did a presentation. The presenter was in San Jose on Google Hangout, and then plugged into the laptop.
So it's just a Sony HD camera.
Yeah, but it's awesome.
You got a nice lens on it though.
Yeah, and the sound's good too. And then the little soundboard.
Yep.
And the mic just picks up the sound just fine. And the thing is, with the Google Hangout, even with they had the sound plugged in, through the laptop or whatever, and it didn't feedback or anything. So the guy gave his presentation through those speakers, and then the camera picks it up, and then the live stream box, because Google Hangout can only have 10 people, the live stream box can scan. So it was.
We've been using the Google Hangout on air feature.
Yeah.
And we have been used to. How much was the live stream box?
I think it's like a couple $100. I have to ask, which is nothing.
Oh, you don't use your
We need to set up one.
whatever.
First thing you do is you see
Yeah.
it's actually converting that to C and then scripting, so I just like fortunately all that shit and then check the 2 or 3 libraries.
If you go to the live stream site to see this, that up, it's gnarly.
Okay. Okay, I thought that's why you're getting disgusted.
Of course, soon you were just turning it off.
No, I love the art.
Yeah,
So I want to play with some
Well, no, it goes. It's happening out of that box.
So the box is Wi-Fi.
Yeah, look.
Okay.
Cat 6 line or whatever to your internets, line to the video, audio, video in, done. Dude, it's awesome. Look how small unit that is. The only thing is you can't look through the viewfinder, you know? So when I'm like zooming in or whatever, I gotta here with this laptop. I'm just going to live stream over the Wi-Fi, and then there's like a 30-second delay. Zoom the camera in. Okay, cool, done. So that's the only minor. There's a minor inconvenience. Yeah, this thing rocks. And then, like I said, with the Google Hangout, you know, and having some good sound too. You know, you really want to trick it out.
Yeah, we're planning on setting something like this up for Crashbase. Fortunately, the CFO, he runs a visual effects company called Flamethrower. So he's got a good, strong video. He understands.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, in this town, hopefully.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to figure it out.
You can put paste on it.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, man. This version went better than last time.
I've done it a few. I've refined the talk, and I've done it a few times now.
Well, and then there were some technical issues too. It wasn't flowing right. So this time I can get it right off. I think the cool thing would be throwing in the other one. He did a little blender hacking and stuff. So,
ones that actually has
but the talk seemed to go longer. But that's this crowd.
Yeah, there were a lot of.
But it's good to talk around because they're engaged into it because it's a cool thing.
No, hardly any skill at all.
So, anyway, so yeah, hit me up. Y'all hit me up, or I'll hit you up in a couple of months. He will do a PD Raspberry thing, or maybe you want to come in with your buds. You know, do like the thing you're doing on the weekends. So you can get them to come out on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Might be happening. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. And you introduced at the beginning somebody, or you mentioned, probably mentioned they were going to do a scale kind of local pearl.
Oh, Pearlmongers, yeah. LA.pm.org. That's the Pearlmongers.
They're fairly active.
Oh yeah, they meet every month. Yeah, the head guy was going to come. He didn't do it. He retweeted this one, but he didn't. And he was telling me he was going to show up. And he's in Santa Monica. Hipster can't make it out to Culver City.
Yeah, I'm a big pearl guy.
They're there. They usually have a table. So
I might actually go.
Well, dude, you gotta go. Yeah. Scale is fine. It's fucking happening. Because it's a grassroots thing. You know? Yeah, no, they definitely. Have you been there before?
No.
Dude, you gotta
go.
Crashbase
has had tables the last 2 years.
I know, you gotta go. No, the thing is, I was like, it's on a fucking Saturday. I'm not gonna do this shit. And I go to all these meetups. But then I started getting into technical podcasts, and I started listening to the podcasts. Whoa, this is gnarly stuff. They got these people coming in from out of, like somebody from Real Audio flew in from Seattle. He's talking about audio on Linux. I'm like, wow, and this is my bag. I gotta start doing this thing. Yeah, I'm telling you, check it out. And like, oh, and then the thing is, they had the woman who runs the hackerspace up in Lee, I think was her name, in Toronto or whatever, or Montreal. She flew in to do a keynote. They had a hackerspace keynote 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're in it.
Yeah, I want to get. I'm kind of thinking of doing an intro to programming class using Perl at Crashbase.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so much.
Yeah, check out la.pm.org
Yeah.
and get on that list, and then invite them too. And I'll mention it to them as well because I usually catch their meetings. Yeah, no, Pearl is there.
I tried getting an older rector says
I get a little bit confused by Python. There are things about it that I don't.
And the other one is I'll tell Randall Schwartz, when he's in town, he'll check that stuff out. Oh, so. Well, the thing is, he consults now. He's consulted here at MT for 2 years or something.
I'd love to have him, even if he wanted to come talk at Craftsman.
I'll hit him up.
Talk about it, but I'd love to.
Oh, well, he's got a great Git talk. I'll hit him up. Yeah.
We've done some Git
I'll let him know. The thing is, he's usually not in town on the weekends. But I can do a week.
For those types of things, we like doing like Wednesday, Thursday night type events.
I'll shoot some email. I'll look you guys up.
Yeah, if he's into it, that would be awesome.
Well, you'll find out. So the thing is, if he's in town, he'll do it, and he knows his schedule well in time. So. The other one is he could interview you guys, maybe. He does the Flawless Weekly, right? The podcast. He could maybe work on some. Oh, the PD dude. That's you should interview that guy.
Yeah, Miller would be. I think would be up for that.
What you want? The way to work that is you have him, your guy, email Merlin at Stonehenge.com. So the way he does it is, don't tell me about these people. Have the player email him for the schedule. That works really well. That'll be good for him.
And if I think Miller would do it. Sometimes he's a little bit of the absent-minded professor.
Yeah.
But
well, you already get 2 P, or maybe you sit in with sit in with him.
But so Miller does, what he calls PD vanilla. Is vanilla PD.
Yeah.
And then people all over the world develop sort of plugins and modules for it.
Yeah.
And then they compile that into something called PD Extended. One of the main guys on that sort of maintains the PD Extended builds.
Yeah.
He's a guy in New York named Hans Christoph Steiner. He's a really cool guy. And
you get the people. It's there. It's everybody Skypes in. So
I'm sure he'd be up for that because.
And they usually, a lot of times they'll do tag team stuff.
You can just project an image on the wall.
But the trick is to have the players email Merlin at Stonehenge.com. But I'll start an email for you to get Randall to come out and then work the rest of it.
I mean, it's not
cool. That door will lock behind you, right? So
yeah, I'm going to be here before everybody leaves. Okay. So if you want to start loading out, and maybe these dudes will help you move out.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll be the last one out of here.
Cool. It'll take me a couple trips.
Yep. No rush.
And you can just say, here's the